Welcome to this quiet corner of history, where the shadows of the past weave together with the calm of the night. Imagine you're sitting by a soft campfire, with the wind whispering ancient secrets, and I'm telling you a story that flows like a serene river. Today, we dive into the world of Roman soldiers, but not into epic battles or grand conquests. No, this time we're talking about something more everyday, more intimate, a simple belt that, in reality, controlled every aspect of their lives. Boring history for sleep, the belt that controlled Roman soldiers' lives. Relax, close your eyes if you want, and let yourself be carried away by this slow narration, designed to wrap you in time, as if you were walking the cobblestone streets of ancient Rome. If this introduction has sparked your curiosity for more stories like this, subscribe to the channel right now. That way, you won't miss the next historical adventures that will help you unwind and rest. Now, picture the setting sun over the hills of Latium in the heart of the Roman Empire, around the 1st century before Christ. The soldiers, those men, hardened by marches and discipline, weren't just warriors. They were the gears that held together a vast territory stretching from the mists of Britannia to the sands of Egypt. But what bound them to themselves, to their duty and to their identity? A belt. Yes, a thick leather belt, adorned with shining metal plates, known as the cingulum militare or beltaeus. It wasn't just a strip of leather to hold up trousers. It was the symbol of their status, their authority, and in many ways, the center of their daily existence. Think of a young recruit. Let's say his name is Marcus, freshly arrived from a remote village in the hills of Etruria. He's an 18-year-old lad, with calloused hands from fieldwork, but eyes full of that mix of fear and excitement that only the start of a great adventure can bring. Upon enlisting in the Legion, the first thing he receives isn't a gleaming sword or an imposing helmet, but that belt, the cingulum militare as the veterans call it, with a tone of almost reverential respect. He feels it heavy in his hands, the tanned leather smelling of earth and oil, the bronze plates cold to the touch, as if they carried the echo of countless marches before him. As Marcus buckles it around his waist for the first time, he notices how it fits snugly, the weight distributing evenly across his hips. It's not uncomfortable. In fact, it's designed to be worn all day, every day even off duty. By Roman law, only soldiers were permitted to wear this unique accessory. It marked them as distinct from civilians, a badge of honor that said, "I am a guardian of the empire." The belt's design was practical yet symbolic. A wide strip of leather, often about 5 to 7 centimeters thick, reinforced with metal studs and plates that could be engraved with intricate patterns, laurels, or the faces of gods like Mars, the patron of war. These plates weren't just for show. They served a functional purpose too. Hanging from the belt were the soldier's most essential tools. On one side, the gladius, the short sword that made Roman infantry legendary for its close-quarters lethality. On the other, the pugio, a dagger for those moments when the fight got too personal. The belt's a suspension system, with loops and hooks, kept these weapons secure yet accessible, ready to be drawn in a heartbeat. And then there was the apron, those dangling strips of leather, tipped with metal studs, that hung down the front like a protective skirt. Historians debate their exact purpose. Some say they offered a bit of defense against low blows, deflecting arrows or slashes to the groin. Others argue they were more about intimidation, clinking and swaying with every step, announcing the soldier's presence like a rhythmic warning. But let's linger here, in this moment with Marcus. As he adjusts the buckle, a sturdy piece of bronze, perhaps shaped like a lion's head, he feels a surge of pride. This isn't just gear, it's a rite of passage. The veterans around him nod approvingly, sharing stories of how their own belts, who have saved them in skirmishes or simply endured the grind of endless campaigns. One grizzled centurion might lean in and say, "Boy, that cingulum is your life now. It holds your weapons, your pouch for coins and rations, even your dignity. Lose it, and you've lost everything." Indeed, the belt was more than utility. It was a status symbol that evolved with the soldier's career. A fresh recruit like Marcus might start with a simple version, plain leather with basic bronze fittings. But as he rose through the ranks, perhaps becoming an immunis exempt from menial duties, or even a centurion commanding a century of men, his belt would grow more ornate. Silver inlays, gemstones, or engraved scenes of victories could adorn it, reflecting his achievements and wealth. In the early empire, under emperors like Augustus and Tiberius, these belts became standardized, part of the uniform that unified legions across continents. Feel the texture in your mind. The rough grain of the leather, softened by sweat and polish over years of use. The metallic taps in the air when it's freshly oiled. The subtle jingle as the apron strips brush against each other during a leisurely walk through the camp. This was the soundtrack of a Roman soldier's life, subtle, constant, reassuring. It connected him to his comrades, all wearing variations of the same emblem, fostering a sense of brotherhood amid the chaos of empire-building. Yet, beneath this calm exterior lay deeper stories. The cingulum wasn't immune to the harsh realities of military life. In times of punishment, a soldier might be stripped of his belt, a humiliating act that symbolized the loss of honor and status. Imagine Marcus, years later, witnessing such a scene. a fellow legionary, accused of desertion, forced to hand over his cingulum before facing the decimation rod or worse. The belt, once a source of pride, becomes a reminder of fragility. As we settle into this tale, let's pause and breathe in the ancient air. The cingulum militare wasn't just an object, it was a thread in the fabric of Roman society, weaving together duty, identity, and survival. It controlled lives not through force but through the quiet power of symbolism and routine. In the flickering light of our imaginary campfire, we can almost see Marcus tightening his belt, ready for whatever the dawn brings. But this is just the beginning. As the night deepens, we'll explore how this humble belt came to be, tracing its origins back through the mists of time. For now, if you're enjoying this gentle journey into the past, subscribe if you like the video. It's a small way to keep these stories coming. Of countless marches before him, but to truly understand the weight Marcus feels, we must journey back further, unwinding the threads of time to where this belt first took shape. Let's drift into the dawn of Rome itself, when the city was little more than a cluster of huts on 7 hills, defended by hardy farmers who doubled as warriors. It was here, in the misty beginnings of the Republic around the 6th century before Christ, that the precursors to the cingulum militare emerged as ornate symbols, but as simple necessities born from the raw demands of survival. Picture those early Romans, descendants of shepherds and settlers, facing threats from neighboring tribes like the Etruscans to the north or the Sabines in the hills. Their belts were humble affairs, strips of leather or woven cloth, cinched tight to hold tunics out of the way during skirmishes. These weren't the decorated masterpieces Marcus now wears. They were practical, unadorned, much like the cinctus mentioned by ancient scholars, a basic girdle for men, distinguishing everyday labor from the chaos of battle. Influenced by the Etruscans, who ruled Rome in its kingship days, these early belts borrowed from their neighbors' craftsmanship. The Etruscans, masters of metalwork, introduced bronze fittings that added a touch of durability. Perhaps a simple buckle shaped like a wolf's head to invoke the spirit of Romulus and Remus. As Rome grew from a fledgling kingdom into a republic, conquering the Italian peninsula piece by piece, the belt evolved alongside the military. By the 4th century before Christ, during wars against the Samnites in the rugged Apennines, soldiers began reinforcing their belts with metal plates to better secure daggers and short swords. Feel the shift in the air, the clink of bronze against leather as a warrior adjusts his gear before charging into a forested ambush. This wasn't mere fashion, it was adaptation. The bolteas, as it was called in those days, a term echoing from Latin roots meaning to gird or encircle, became essential for carrying the weight of expanding arsenals. Historians note how Greek influences seeped in too, from the Hellenistic kingdoms Rome encountered during the Punic Wars against Carthage. Greek hoplites wore-zoned belts, wide and supportive, which Roman generals like Scipio Africanus admired and adapted, blending them with Italic traditions to create something uniquely Roman. Let's linger on a vivid scene from those turbulent times. Imagine a soldier named Gaius, an ancestor of our young Marcus, standing on the blood-soaked fields of Cannae in 216 before Christ. The air thick with dust and the cries of the wounded. Gaius tightens his balteus, a sturdy leather band with crude iron hooks holding his gladius steady. This belt, forged in the smithies of Rome's growing forges, saved lives not through armor but through reliability, preventing weapons from slipping during the desperate push against Hannibal's forces. But then, disaster struck. Rome lost that day, and many belts were stripped from the fallen, trophies for the Carthaginians. Yet, from such defeats came innovation. In the aftermath, Roman engineers refined the design, adding more plates for protection and loops for pouches, turning the belt into a mobile toolkit. Drifting forward to the late Republic, around the time of Julius Caesar's conquests in Gaul during the 1st century before Christ, the balteus truly began to resemble the cingulum Marcus knows. Caesar's legions, marching through fog-shrouded forests and across the Rhine, needed gear that endured endless campaigns. The belt grew wider, often 10 centimeters across, with dangling strips, early versions of the apron that swayed like pendulums, their metal tips glinting under the pale northern sun. These additions weren't random. They drew from Celtic influences, where warriors wore studded belts as talismans of bravery. Romans, ever pragmatic, adopted what worked, integrating bronze and iron from conquered mines. A soft whisper of history tells us that by this era, the belt was no longer just functional, it carried status. Officers like centurions sported versions with silver accents, a nod to their authority, while common legionaries like Gaius's descendants personalized theirs with etched symbols of their home gods, Jupiter's thunderbolt or Minerva's owl. But evolution wasn't linear. It twisted with the empire's fortunes. As Rome transitioned from republic to empire under Augustus in 27 before Christ, standardization swept through the ranks. Augustus, the first emperor, reformed the military, making the cingulum militare a uniform emblem, no longer called just balteus. That term faded into civilian use. The military belt became the cingulum, a word once associated with women's girdles but repurposed for warriors. symbolizing the binding of loyalty to the state. Imagine the imperial workshops in Rome, hammers ringing softly in the twilight, as artisans stamped plates with imperial eagles, forging thousands for the 20 legions guarding the frontiers. This shift marked a deeper control. The belt now represented not just the soldier, but the emperor's grasp on their lives. Yet, beneath these grand changes lay personal stories that humanized the origins. Think of a veteran from the social wars. In the late 2nd century before Christ, a man named Quintus who passed his worn Balteus to his son. That belt, scarred from battles against Italian allies, carried tales of betrayal and reconciliation, how it once held a pouch of looted coins, then later a letter from home. Quintus might have whispered to his boy, "This cingulum binds our family to Rome's destiny, just as it bound me in the line." Such inheritances wove the belt into the fabric of Roman identity. From humble origins to imperial might, as we pause here, inhaling the scent of aged leather and forged metal from across centuries, reflect on how these ancient roots shape the belt Marcus buckles each morning. It's a lineage of resilience, blending Etruscan artistry, Greek utility, and Celtic flair into a Roman masterpiece. If this unfolding tale of quiet evolution is drawing you deeper into relaxation, subscribe if you like the video. Your support keeps these serene histories alive. But the origins are only the foundation. Now, as the stars wheel overhead in our imagined night sky, let's turn to the craftsmanship itself, the designs and materials that brought this belt from concept to reality, enduring through the hands of countless smiths and tanners. Of ancient forges and tanneries, these weren't mere workshops, they were the beating hearts of Roman ingenuity, where raw hides and ores transformed into something that could withstand the empire's relentless demands. As Marcus runs his fingers over the smooth edges of his new cingulum, he might wonder at the hands that crafted it. Tanners knee-deep in vats of urine and oak bark, smiths hammering bronze under the glow of charcoal fires. The design of the cingulum militare was a masterpiece, a form meeting function, evolving from those early republican prototypes into a standardized marvel by the time of the Principate. Let's ease into the details, feeling the grain of history as we go, like tracing the veins in a well-worn piece of leather. At its core, the belt began with the leather-sturdy cowhide or goatskin, sourced from the vast herds that roamed the Italian countryside or were imported from provinces like Hispania. Tanners would soak the hides in lime pits to loosen the hair, then scrape them clean with curved knives, a process that filled the air with a pungent, earthy scent you can almost imagine now, sharp and acrid, mingling with the smoke from nearby bakeries in Rome's bustling Subura district. Once cleaned, the leather was tanned using vegetable extracticorns, chestnut bark, or sumac leaves steeped in water for weeks, turning the hides supple yet tough enough to resist the slash of a blade or the chafe of constant wear. This wasn't quick work. It took months, ensuring the belt could endure years of sweat, rain, and blood without cracking. But the true artistry shone in the metalwork. The plates, often called filigree, or simply fittings, were cast from bronze and alloy of copper and tin mined from Cyprus or the Iberian Peninsula, where Roman legions guarded the shafts like treasures. Smiths melted the metals in crucibles over open flames, pouring them into clay molds carved with intricate designs. Picture a workshop in Pompeii, before Vesuvius claimed it, where apprentices polished these plates to a gleam, engraving motifs that told stories of power, imperial eagles with outstretched wings, symbolizing Jupiter's favor, vine leaves for Bacchus invoking the joys of victory feasts, or thunderbolts for the god of war. These weren't random. They reflected the soldier's unit or personal devotions, adding a layer of spiritual protection amid the material one. Belt's structure was deceptively simple yet brilliantly engineered. The main band, typically 30 to 40 centimeters long when laid flat but adjustable via buckles, wrapped around the waist just above the hips, distributing weight evenly to prevent fatigue during long marches. Width varied 5 to 8 centimeters for standard issue, but always reinforced with stitching of waxed linen thread, strong as sinew. Attached were the iconic apron strips, 4 to 8 in number, each about 20 centimeters long, dangling from the front like a fringe. These terrages, as some called them, were leather tongues tipped with metal studs or bosses, hammered from the same bronze. Debate lingers among modern scholars about their role. Did they truly deflect blows to vulnerable areas, or were they more for show, clattering intimidatingly as a legion advanced? Perhaps both. In the heat of battle, that rhythmic jingle could mask the fear in a man's heart, turning a line of soldiers into an unbreakable wall. Hooks and loops, forged with precision, allowed for customization. On Marcus's belt, a series of bronze rings secured a scabbard for his gladius, positioned for a right-handed draw, quick, instinctive, life-saving. Another loop holds the Pugio dagger, its hilt often inlaid with bone or ivory for grip. And don't forget the practical additions. A small pouch or loculus sewn directly onto the leather for carrying coins, dice for gambling in camp, or a scrap of parchment with a loved one's name. Some belts even featured hidden compartments, clever folds in the leather where a soldier might stash a talisman, a tiny figurine of Fortuna, goddess of luck, to whisper protection during sieges. Materials evolved with the empire's reach. In the early days, under the Republic, iron was common for cheaper fittings, rust-prone but abundant from Etruscan mines. By Augustus's reforms, bronze dominated corrosion-resistant, lighter, and easier to polish to that intimidating shine. For elite units like the Praetorian Guard in Rome, silver plating or even gold accents appeared, sourced from Dacian mines after Trajan's conquests in the 2nd century after Christ. Imagine the envy in a legionary's eyes as he spots a centurion's cingulum gleaming with such luxury, the metal catching the Mediterranean sun like a promise of promotion. Yet craftsmanship wasn't without its human touch and flaws. Not every belt was perfect. Archaeological finds from sites like Vindonissa in modern Switzerland reveal variations, some with mismatched plates, perhaps repairs from battlefield scavenging, others with crude engravings done by the soldiers themselves during downtime. One such artifact, a belt from the 1st century, bears a scratched inscription, property of Valerius Legio 21 Rep. Valerius might have been like Marcus Young, hope-fletching his name with a nail to claim ownership in a world where gear was communal. But then, tragedy could strike. If lost in combat, a belt might be reworked by enemy hands, its Roman symbols filed away, reborn as a trophy. Drift with me through a day in the life of these creators. A tanner named Lucius, working in a tannery along the Tiber, rises at dawn to stretch hides on frames, his hands stained dark from the dyes. By midday he delivers the finished leather to a nearby smithy, where Fabius, a freed slave with scars from the forge, hammers the plates. Their collaboration produces belts by the dozen, shipped to legions via the empire's roads via Appia stretching south, or the Rhine frontier northward. This supply chain was the belt's silent controller, binding economy to military might. As we savor these textures, the cool slide of metal, the warm give of leather, consider how they mirrored Rome's soul, durable, adaptable, beautiful in utility. Marcus, buckling his cingulum each morning, feels that legacy, a quiet assurance in an uncertain world. If this delve into the artisan's world is lulling you into a peaceful reverie, subscribe if you like the video. It's the thread that connects us across these tales. But materials alone don't define the belt. It's how they signified a man's place in the hierarchy that truly controlled lives. As the fire's embers dim, let's follow that path from humble recruit to seasoned veteran, where the cingulum became a ladder of ambition woven into every plate and strap. For Marcus, that first buckling isn't just a practical act. It's an initiation into a world where the cingulum marks not only what you carry, but who you are, a visible rung on the ladder of Roman military hierarchy. As he stands in the shadow of the campus Principia, the headquarters where oaths are sworn and fates decided, the belt around his waist feels like a promise. Start as a lowly Tyrone's a recruit, and with valor and time, it could gleam with the trappings of command. Let's settle deeper into this gentle current of history, exploring how this simple accessory controlled lives through the subtle language of status. From the greenest soldier to the battle-scarred veteran, binding them all in a chain of honor, an aspiration. In the early days of a legionary's career like Marcus's, the cingulum was deliberately plain, a stark reminder of humility amid the empire's grandeur. Fresh from civilian life, recruits received basic versions, unadorned leather with minimal bronze fittings, perhaps just enough plates to secure essentials without drawing attention. This wasn't cruelty, it was discipline. Roman military doctrine, shaped by reformers like Marius in the late Republic, emphasized equality in the ranks to foster unity. Imagine Marcus on his first day, surrounded by fellow Tyrones from across the province's Gauls with braided hair, Iberians with sun-kissed skin, all fumbling with identical belts under the watchful eye of a drill sergeant. The cingulum here symbolized potential, not achievement. It held the gladius but also the weight of expectation. To lose it through negligence, and you'd face the vitus, the centurion's vine staff, a stinging rebuke that reinforced the belt's role as a custodian of dignity. But as years passed and campaigns unfolded, the belt transformed, mirroring the soldier's ascent. Promotion wasn't swift. It demanded endurance. After basic training, Marcus might become a Miles Gregarious, a common foot soldier, earning the right to add a few engravings, perhaps a simple laurel wreath for surviving his first battle. Feel the quiet pride in that moment. After a skirmish on the Danube frontier, Marcus sits by a flickering lamp, using a sharpened nail to etch the symbol into a plate, the metal yielding with a soft scrape that echoes his heartbeat. Such personalizations were tolerated, even encouraged, as they boosted morale. By the time of emperors like Trajan in the 2nd century after Christ, regulations allowed for incremental upgrades, and immunes specialized in engineering or administration could affix additional hooks for tools, their belts subtly heavier, signifying exemption from grunt work. Drift with me to the heart of this hierarchy. The centurions, those backbone officers commanding centuries of 80 men. Their cinguli were spectacles of authority, wider bands, often with silver inlays or gemstone studs, the apron strips longer and more numerous, clinking like chimes of command. A centurion like Lucius, a fictional but realistic figure from the Legio to Augusta, might have worn a belt engraved with scenes of Dacian wars. Each played a chapter of his rise. Starting as a recruit under Claudius's invasion of Britain in 43 after Christ, Lucius's cingulum evolved from plain to ornate, the added weight a metaphor for responsibility. In camp, subordinates saluted not just the man, but the belt, a visual cue that said, "This one leads." Punishments often involved emotion through the belt. A disgraced officer stripped of his silver plates, reduced to bronze, a public shaming that controlled behavior more effectively than chains. Higher still were the optiones, deputies to centurions, and the centiferri standard-bearers whose belts bore extra pouches for carrying eagle emblems or unit insignia. But the pinnacle for many was the primus pilus, the chief centurion of a legion, whose cingulum might rival an equestrian's finery. Gold accents from eastern conquests, intricate filigree depicting victories at places like Masada during the Jewish revolt. These belts weren't just symbols. They influenced daily interactions. A veteran with an ornate cingulum commanded respect in the marketplace, where civilians deferred, knowing the law forbade non-soldiers from wearing such gear. This exclusivity bred a sense of elite brotherhood, but also isolation, set apart, their lives controlled by the very emblem that elevated them. Yet, status wasn't without its burdens. Consider a story drawn from the annals, blended with the plausible whispers of the past. A veteran named Titus, retiring after 20 years under Hadrian's Wall in the 2nd century. His cingulum, scarred and polished from countless polishes, held memories: a dent from a Pictish arrow, a replaced buckle from a lost wager. Upon discharge, he received an honorable diploma, but the belt, he kept it a primia militia, military reward, symbolizing his evocator status, if recalled. But in civilian life, wearing it fully could invite envy or legal scrutiny. Many veterans hung them as heirlooms, passing the status to sons like Marcus. This transition highlighted the belt's control. It defined you in service, and its absence redefined you in peace, a quiet reminder that true freedom was illusory. Archaeology breathes life into these tales. Finds from sites like Carleon in Wales revealed belts graded by rank, recruit versions sparse, centurion ones lavish with imported amber beads. One such artifact, from a fort along the Rhine, bears an inscription, "To Mars, from Centurion Flavius, for victory." Flavius, perhaps, prayed over his cingulum before battle, the gods invoked through its gleam. This spiritual dimension added layers. Belts as amulets controlling fate as much as status. As Marcus advances in our imagination, from recruit polishing his basic belt to a Miles dreaming of silver, he embodies this progression. Each addition to the cingulum marks a milestone, a campaign clasp for Parthia, a stud for loyalty during a mutiny quashed. It's a ladder, yes, but one that demands climbs through mud and blood, where falling means disgrace. In the soft glow of our campfire tale, we see how the belt wove ambition into routine, controlling aspirations with every buckle. If this gentle ascent through ranks is wrapping you in the warmth of ancient dreams, subscribe if you like the video. Click on as these forgotten stories. But status shines brightest in the grind of everyday existence, where the cingulum wasn't just worn, but lived. As the night whispers on, let's ease into that daily rhythm, where the belt anchored every moment, from dawn reveille to twilight rest. From dawn reveille to twilight rest, imagine Marcus stirring in the dim pre-dawn glow of the Contubernium, the shared tent where 8 men bunked like brothers in a world of iron discipline. The first thing he does, even before splashing water on his face from a communal basin, is reach for his cingulum, buckled loosely overnight for quick access, now tightened with a familiar tug that sets the tone for the day. In the Roman soldier's life, the belt wasn't an afterthought. It was the constant companion, the anchor that structured every routine, controlling the flow of hours with its unyielding presence. Let's drift through a typical day in the legions, feeling the subtle pull of this accessory as it wove through meals, drills, and quiet moments. A silent overseer in the empire's vast machinery. Reveille sounded with the blast of a cornu horn, echoing across the Castro, the fortified camp that mimicked a miniature city, complete with streets and gates. Marcus, like his comrades, would rise swiftly, the weight of the cingulum reminding him of readiness. It held his tunic in place, preventing the woolen fabric from tangling during hasty movements, and secured the caligae sandal straps indirectly, through posture. Breakfast was sparse, a handful of pulse, porridge, or hard bucelatum biscuits from the pouch on his belt, eaten on the go. The cingulum's loculus pouch was crucial here, stuffed with rations doled out the night before. It ensured no soldier went hungry, controlling sustenance in a life where supply lines could stretch hundreds of miles. Picture the scene: men huddled around a small fire, the apron strips of their belts dangling as they leaned forward, the metal tips warming slightly in the flames, a rhythmic clink accompanying shared jokes about the centurion's temper. Then came the morning drills, the backbone of Roman efficiency. Marcus would march to the parade ground, the cingulum distributing the load of his gear, gladius on one hip, pugio on the other, perhaps a small tool like a Delabra pickaxe hooked for engineering duties. The belt's design excelled here. Its width supported the lower back during hours of formation practice, where legions perfected the testudo shield wall or the wedge charge, but then fatigue set in. A loose buckle could mean a slipping sword, a distraction that earned lashes. The cingulum controlled posture too tightened just so. It encouraged an upright stance, embodying the discipline drilled into every recruit. Instructors barked orders, adjust your balteus. It holds your honor as much as your blade. For Marcus's early mishaps like fumbling a drawer during sword practice taught him to treat the belt as an extension of his body. Its leather molding, to his form over time, softened by olive oil rubs that filled the air with a faint herbal scent. Midday brought labor, for Roman soldiers were builders as much as fighters. Whether constructing roads in Gaul or fortifying walls along the Rhine, the cingulum adapted seamlessly. Loops held hammers or measuring rods, the apron providing minor protection against sparks or debris. Imagine Marcus hauling stones for via militares, the belt's weight grounding him as sweat beaded on his brow, the plates reflecting the sun like tiny mirrors. Lunch might be fermentum grain from the pouch, ground into flatbread on a portable quern stone again, the utility shining, as it kept hands free for work. But then, a moment of respite. During the siesta hour in warmer climates, soldiers lounged in the shade, belts loosened but never removed. For regulations forbade it except in private. This rule controlled vigilance. Even at rest, the jingle of a comrade's apron signaled alertness, a subtle network of sound in the camp's hum. Afternoon training intensified sparring sessions where the gladius was drawn repeatedly, the belt's hooks ensuring smooth action. Marcus might practice with a wooden Rudy's sword against a post, the cingulum's stability preventing twists that could lead to injury. Personal stories peppered these routines. Think of a fellow legionary, perhaps named Severus, who once credited his belt with saving him during a mock battle. A strap caught a glancing blow, deflecting it just enough to avoid a bruise. The gods live in the leather, he'd say with a grin, polishing his plates obsessively. Such anecdotes humanized the grind. But the cingulum also enforced hierarchy in daily interactions. Centurions' ornate belts commanded instant obedience, their clink a prelude to orders like latrine duty or watch shifts. As evening fell, the belt transitioned to off-duty roles, though off-duty was relative in a soldier's controlled existence. Dinner around the mess fire, posca vinegar water from a flask hooked to the cingulum, shared with contubernal's tent mates. The pouch might yield dice for a game of tally, gambling small sesterti coins under torchlight. But then, tensions arose. A lost bet could lead to fisticuffs, where the belt's weapons were sheathed by code, but its presence reminded all of the thin line between camaraderie and combat. Bathing in the camps, thermi followed for those in permanent forts. Belts hung on pegs, but watched closely, for theft meant severe punishment. Marcus learned this the hard way early on, guarding his like a treasure after a comrade's was pilfered, leading to a flogging for the thief. Night watches punctuated the routine, the cingulum fully armed for patrols along the Valum ramparts. In the quiet hours, its weight was comforting, a tactile link to duty amid the stars. Sentries whispered passwords, the belt's subtle shift signaling movement in the dark. Back in the tent, sleep came with a cingulum nearby and buckled but within reach, controlling even dreams through readiness. For veterans, it bore scars. A notch from a barbarian axe, a faded engraving from a lost love, one tale, drawn from historical echoes, tells of a soldier in Britannia who used his apron strips to bind a wound mid-watch, the metal studs staunching blood until dawn. Through it all, the cingulum orchestrated the day like a metronome, in labor, symbolic in rest, a controller of time and task. Marcus, over months, came to see it not as burden, but as rhythm, sinking his life to the legion's beat. In cooler evenings, polishing it became meditative, the oil's gleam reflecting campfires like distant memories. If this serene glimpse into daily rhythms is easing you toward slumber, subscribe if you like the video. It's a gentle nod that keeps these tales flowing. Yet, no day was complete without the forge of training, where the belt first tested a recruit's mettle. As shadows lengthen in our story, let's step onto the field of preparation, where lessons began with sweat and steel. With sweat and steel, for Marcus, those initial weeks in the training field known as the Campus Exercitorius were a crucible where the cingulum transitioned from unfamiliar weight to indispensable ally, shaping raw recruits into the disciplined cogs of Rome's war machine. Picture the vast open ground outside the camp walls, dust kicking up under sandaled feet as the sun climbs high over the Italian plains, the air thick with the shouts of instructors and the clash of practice weapons. Here the belt wasn't just worn, was tested, its every hook and plate scrutinized in drills that controlled a soldier's movements, instincts, and very survival. Let's ease into this formative phase, where first lessons etched the cingulum's role deep into muscle memory, a gentle rhythm of repetition that built empires one step at a time. Arrival at the training field marked a true beginning of transformation. Marcus, herded with his cohort of wide-eyed Tyrones, would line up at dawn, the cingulum already buckled as per orders, loose straps earning immediate correction. The centurion, his own ornate belt gleaming as a model of perfection, would inspect each one, fingers tracing the leather for cracks, tugging at hooks to ensure the gladius hung just right. "This cingulum is your lifeline," he'd growl, voice carrying like a distant thunder. "It controls your draw, your balance fail it, and you fail Rome." For many recruits, this was the first harsh lesson. The belt demanded maintenance, polished daily with a mixture of beeswax and vinegar that left a faint, tangy scent lingering on the hands. Neglect it, and chafing or slippage could turn a drill into disaster. Basic stance drills came first, deceptively simple yet grueling. Soldiers stood in formation, the cingulum helping maintain posture as they held heavy peeler javelins aloft for hours. Feel the strain in your own back as you imagine it, the belt's width distributing the torque, preventing slouches that invited the vitus staff's sting. But then, movement began marching in step, the apron strips swaying in unison, their clink, a metronome for the cohort's rhythm. Marcus learned quickly. A misstep meant the belt's weight shifted awkwardly, throwing off balance. Instructors exploited this, ordering sudden halts where a poorly secured pugio could clatter free, leading to laps around the field with arms raised. The cingulum controlled precision here, its design ensuring weapons stayed put during the cadence. Stomp that echoed across empires. Swordsmanship followed, the heart of Roman lethality. Drawing the gladius from its scabbard suspended at the perfect angle by the belt's hooksby came second. Nature through endless repetition. Marcus would face a wooden post, scarred from countless strikes, practicing thrusts and parries under the watchful eyes of veterans. The belt's role was pivotal, too low, and the draw snagged. Too high, and reach suffered. Feel it guide you, an older soldier might advise during breaks, sharing water from a canteen. One vivid memory for Marcus might be his first sparring match against a burly Gaul recruit where the cingulum's apron deflected a glancing practice blow, the metal stud absorbing the impact with a dull thud. But then, overconfidence led to a tumble. Rolling in the dirt, he felt the belt's plates press into his side, a painful reminder to respect its limits. These sessions built not just skill, but trust in the gear. The leather warming to body heat as sweat soaked through. Shieldwork integrated next, amplifying the cingulum's utility. The heavy scutum shield, rectangular and curved, was maneuvered in tandem with the belt's arsenal. In testudo formation drills, tortoiseshell walls of interlocking shields, soldiers crouched low, the cingulum allowing fluid shifts without entanglement. Imagine the strain, knees bent, back arched, the belt's support crucial against the press of comrades. Peeler throws tested coordination. Marcus hurled the javelin while keeping his gladius secure, the belt's loops preventing any shift. Failures were instructive. A thrown belt in punishment, forcing a recruit to drill unarmed, humiliated, and vulnerable. This control extended to psychological lessons. The cingulum symbolized readiness, its absence a stark void that drilled home. Dependence. Afternoon brought endurance training. Marches laden with full kits, Arsena packs strapped over shoulders, but the cingulum bearing the immediate load. Recruits covered miles on simulated terrain, rocky paths mimicking frontier wilds. The belt chafed at first, raw skin under leather, but ointments of lanolin soothed it, turning discomfort into resilience. Marcus might recall a grueling hike where rain turned the ground to mud. His cingulum, oiled against weather, held firm, while others slipped, weapons lost in the slurry. But then, triumph, reaching the summit, the group shared a moment of camaraderie. Belts unbuckled briefly for rest, the jingles silenced in exhaustion. Instructors wove in tactics and bush simulations, where a quick draw from the belt meant survival. One tale passed like folklore, spoke of a recruit who used his apron strips to lash a broken practice sword, improvising under duress. Evening reviews cemented the day's teachings. Around the fire, centurions dissected errors, pointing to the cingulum as both culprit and cure. It controls your chaos, they'd say, demonstrating adjustments. Personal engravings began here, to Marcus etching a small eagle after his first successful drill, a quiet act of ownership. For some, like a fictional companion named Decimus, the belt held deeper meaning, a hidden amulet in the pouch, a lock of hair from home, controlling homesickness amid the grind. These first lessons weren't mere physicality. They instilled a mindset where the cingulum orchestrated survival. Marcus emerged tougher, the belt no longer heavy but harmonious, its every detail a learned ally. In quieter moments, polishing under stars, he'd reflect on how it bound him to the Legion's legacy. If this immersive dive into training's forge is lulling you with its steady pace, subscribe if you like the video. Your support fuels these tranquil explorations. But training's end led to the true test, endless marches that carried the Empire's weight. As the field fades in our tale, let's follow the dust clouds of those eternal roads where the cingulum endured the miles. Those endless Roman roads, veins of the Empire stretching like unyielding threads across continents, were where the belt truly proved its mastery over a soldier's existence, controlling pace, burden, and resolve through every grueling step. For Marcus, fresh from the training field's rigors, His first real march was a revelation, not the glory of conquest, but the monotonous grind that forged legions into unbreakable forces. Picture the column snaking along the Via Appia, gravel crunching under Caligay sandals, the sun beating down on helmets as far as the eye could see. The cingulum, buckled tight against the sway of heavy packs, became the silent conductor of this symphony of endurance, a companion that whispered persistence amid the dust and sweat. Let's wander these paths together, feeling the steady rhythm of leather and metal that bound men to their duty. Mile after relentless mile. Roman marches were legendary for their efficiency, covering up to 30 miles a day under full load, a feat that demanded gear as disciplined as the men themselves. The cingulum anchored it all, suspending the gladius and pugio to avoid chafing thighs, its wide band supporting the lower back against the 20-kilogram sasana pack slung over one shoulder via a furcapole. Marcus learned this on his inaugural trek from Rome southward, toward a garrison in Campania. The belt's loops secured rations, a cloak for night chills, even a small cooking pot that clanged softly with each stride. But then, fatigue crept in. Blisters formed where leather met skin, yet the cingulum's oiled surface resisted, molded by body heat into a second skin. Veterans like his tent mate, a grizzled Iberian named Rufus, would chuckle at recruits' complaints. The belt controls the march, lad, not you. Tighten it right, and it'll carry you further than your legs ever could. The design excelled in motion. The apron strips, dangling like protective pendants, swayed hypnotically, their metal tips warding off underbrush and forested trails or deflecting pebbles kicked up by the man ahead. In open plains, under the relentless sun of Hispania or the foggy mists of Germania, the belt's bronze plates reflected light, a shimmering line that unified the cohort visually, a psychological boost when morale flagged. Historical accounts, like those from Josephus during the Jewish wars, described legions marching in tight formation, the collective jingle of singly creating an auditory wave that intimidated foes from afar. For Marcus, this sound became a lullaby of sorts during night marches when torches flickered and wolves howled in the distance. The belt's weight grounded him, controlling fear through familiarity. But marches weren't without peril, and the cingulum often tipped the scales between survival and collapse. Imagine a forced march under Julius Caesar in Gaul, around 58 before Christ, where legions crossed rivers swollen by spring melts. Soldiers waded chest deep, the belt keeping weapons elevated and dry its hooks, preventing loss to the current. Marcus might experience a similar trial en route to the Rhine. Rain turning the road to muck, his asana threatening to topple. The cingulum's stability saved him. A quick adjustment redistributed the load, allowing him to press on while others stumbled. Yet accidents happened, a buckle snagging on a branch, yanking a man off balance into a ditch. Punishments followed. A soldier stripped of his belt for the remainder of the day, marching vulnerable and shamed, weapons carried awkwardly in hands. This control extended to logistics. At halts, belts were inspected, pouches inventoried for contraband like extra wine, enforcing the iron rationing that sustained campaigns. Personal tales humanized these ordeals. Consider a story inspired by the marches of Trajan's Dacian wars in the early 2nd century after Christ. A legionary named Appius, whose cingulum bore a hidden flaw, a cracked plate from prior training. During a grueling ascent through the Carpathians, the belts held, but barely. He repaired it at camp with wire scavenged from a fallen comrade's gear, whispering thanks to Vulcan, god of forges. Appius passed this wisdom to recruits. The road tests the belt, and the belt tests the man. For Marcus, such lore came alive during rest stops, contabinels sharing bread from their pouches, belts loosened but weapons within reach. One evening, under a canopy of stars, Rufus recounted a desert march in Egypt, sand infiltrating every crease, the cingulum's leather swelling with moisture from sparse oases, yet enduring without fail. But then, disaster struck for some. Dehydration felled a man. His belt stripped post-mortem as per custom, redistributed to a new recruiter's cycle of control that reminded all of mortality. Engineering feats intertwined with these journeys. The cingulum adapting to the roads it helped build. Legions constructed VAA as they advanced straight, layered paths of gravel and stone that spanned thousands of miles. Marcus, assigned to a work detail, used his belt's hooks to secure tools, a delabra for digging, a measuring chain for alignment. The apron protected against flying shards as hammers struck, its studs gleaming with fresh earth. In Britain, under Agricola's campaigns around 80 after Christ, marches through boggy moors tested limits, belts bogged down with mud, but their robust construction allowed quick cleaning with river water. This practicality controlled efficiency. Soldiers who maintained their singly marched farther, built stronger, conquered more. As days blurred into weeks, the march fostered bonds, songs chanted in step, the cingulum's jingle providing percussion, left, right, belt tight, Rome's might. Marcus found solace in this. The belt, once a stranger, now pulsed with his heartbeat, controlling rhythm in isolation. Yet, hardships mounted: blistering heat in Syria, where leather cracked without oil, or freezing Gaul, where metal chilled to the bone. Remedies were communal, sharing polish, mending straps, a brotherhood sealed by shared burdens. Archaeological echoes affirm these realities. Belt fragments from Hadrian's Wall sites show wear patterns from prolonged marches, thinned leather at pressure points, polished plates from constant motion. One find, a cingulum from a roadside grave, inscribed with miles per virs infinitus, soldier, through endless roads, evokes the eternal trek on our serene narrative. Marcus's marches etch resilience, the cingulum a steadfast guide through empire's arteries. It controlled not just gear but grit, turning trudges into triumphs. If this rhythmic tale of roads unending is carrying you gently along, subscribe if you like the video. It's the path that leads to more such journeys, but marches inevitably. It led to conflict, where the belt's utility faced its fiercest trial. As the horizon darkens with gathering foes, let's advance into those epic battles, where protection and readiness hung by a strap. In the thunderous chaos of Roman battles, where legions clashed against barbarians, rebels, and rival empires, the cingulum militare emerged as a quiet hero controlling the frenzy. Through swift access to arms and a modicum of defense in the whirlwind of steel and shouts. For Marcus, his first taste of true combat came not in some grand arena, but on a fog-shrouded field along the Danube, where Dacian warriors surged like shadows from the trees. The belt, once a mere daily companion, now dictated life and death, its hooks ensuring the gladius drew smoothly, its plates offering fleeting shields against the storm. Let's immerse ourselves in these epic confrontations, where the cingulum's subtle influence turned the tide, a serene undercurrent amid the roar, weaving protection and readiness into the fabric of survival. Roman battles were orchestrated symphonies of strategy, but at their core, they were visceral melees where individual gear like the cingulum made the difference. As legions formed up in the classic triple XAIC3 lines of infantry, the belt kept weapons poised. Marcus' heart pounding in his chest like a war drum would check his buckle one last time. The leather taut against his larica armo, the gladius hung at his right hip, ready for the underhand thrust that defined Roman close quarters dominance. The Pugio dagger opposite, a backup for when foes closed too near. Historians like Vegetius in his De Re Militare describe how such suspension systems prevented tankless, allowing soldiers to transition seamlessly from pila javelin volleys to sword work. In the Battle of Teutoburg Forest in 9 after Christ, a disastrous ambush for Rome, the survivors credited their belts for quick draws amid the German thickets, where every second controlled fate. Picture the charge, horns blaring, the front line advancing with shields locked, the cingulum's apron strips clinking in a crescendo that masked the fear. These strips, often dismissed as ornamental, provided practical protection, deflecting low slashes or arrow fragments aimed at the groin and thighs, vulnerable spots in the Roman kit. In one imagined but plausible skirmish during Claudius's British invasion in 43 after Christ, a soldier like Marcus faced Celtic chariots thundering down. An enemy spear glanced off his apron's metal boss, the impact jarring but not piercing, buying him time to counter. But then, the press intensified. Comrades fell, and the belt's pouches yielded emergency bandages, strips of cloth tucked away for just such horrors. The cingulum controlled improvisation too. A loop might snag a fallen pilum, or its sturdy bands serve as a tourniquet in the lulls between waves. Deeper into the fray, the belt's role in weapon management shone brightest. The gladius, that short, stabbing sword, was drawn with a fluid motion honed in training the cingulum's angle, ensuring it cleared without snagging on armor or neighbor. Accounts from Caesar's Gallic Wars around 50 before Christ paint vivid scenes: legions pushing through Aedui lines, soldiers reloading pila from belt-slung quivers mid. For Marcus, in his Danube clash, the Pugio proved vital. A Dacian warrior grappled close, axe raised, but the dagger's quick release from the belt allowed a desperate stab, turning defeat into a narrow escape. Yet, not all tales ended well. A loose hook could mean a dropped weapon, as happened to many in the chaos of Cannae in 216 before Christ, where Hannibal's encirclement left Romans scrambling, belts stripped from the slain as trophies. The cingulum also influenced tactics on a grander scale. Centurions, their ornate belts flashing signals of command, directed maneuvers from the front, whistles blown, orders shouted over the din. In the siege of Alesia in 52 before Christ, Vercingetorix's Gauls assaulted the Roman circuit. Defenders like hypothetical veteran Lucius relied on their belts to hold tools for hasty repairs, hammers for stakes, knives for ropes amid bombardment. The apron's weight grounded them during sprints across ramparts, its jingle a rally cry. But then, night assaults brought new terrors. In darkness, the belt's tactile familiarity controlled actions, finding the Pugio hilt by feel alone, a silent guardian against unseen foes. Personal stories, drawn from the echoes of ancient texts and archaeological whispers, add warmth to these cold clashes. Think of a legionary named Quintus during Trajan's Parthian campaign in 114 after Christ. His cingulum, engraved with a protective Mars figure, deflected a Persian arrow that would have ended him. Grateful, he added a silver stud post-battle, a talisman that boosted his comrades' morale. For Marcus, a similar moment might unfold in a later engagement. Shield shattered. He uses the belt's sturdy strap to lash it temporarily, holding the line until reinforcements arrive. Such ingenuity highlighted the belt's versatility, not just holder of arms, but extender of will. Even in defeat, the cingulum asserted control. Captured soldiers were often stripped of their belts, first a symbolic emasculation, as seen in the aftermath of Carrhae in 53 before Christ, where Parthians paraded Roman cinguli as spoils. Survivors like those from Varus's lost legions scavenged replacements from the dead, piecing together honor from fragments. Archaeology supports this. Belt fittings from battlefield sites like Calcaries in Germany show hasty repairs, dents from desperate PAROIES. That's battles waned. The cingulum facilitated the grim aftermath, pouches yielding coins for the ferryman, Charon placed on fallen eyes, or letters home tucked safely away. In victory feasts, belts loosened but weapons near, a reminder that peace was fleeting. Marcus, emerging bloodied but alive, would polish his cingulum by firelight, each scratch a story etched in bronze. In these epic arenas, the belt wasn't mere accessory. It was the thread binding chaos to order, protection to prowess. It controlled the soldier's hand, heart, and horizon, a quiet force in the storm. If this evocative dance through battle's edge is drawing you into a restful trance, subscribe if you like the video. It's a simple way to summon more of these soothing sagas, yet, amid the grand sweeps of war, individual lives pulsed with their own dramas. As the echoes of clash fade, let's turn to one such tale, the personal journey of Lucius the Young, whose cingulum chronicled a life of trials and triumphs. Lucius wasn't a figure from the grand annals of emperors or generals, but a humble legionary much like Marcus, born in the dusty streets of Ostia around 50 after Christ, during the reign of Claudius. His story, pieced together from the whispers of historical fragments and the plausible threads of everyday Roman lives, unfolds through the lens of his belt, a simple cingulum that started as plain leather but grew into a tapestry of memories, controlling his path from boyhood dreams to weathered retirement. Let's linger in this intimate narrative, where the belt becomes more than gear. It's a silent witness to human struggles, joys, and the quiet conflicts that shaped one man's world amid the empire's vast shadow. Lucius's journey began in the shadow of Rome's port, where ships unloaded spices from the east and recruits boarded, or distant frontiers. At 17, wide-eyed and eager, he enlisted in the Legio XIV Gemina, drawn by tales of glory spun by returning veterans in the taverns. His first cingulum, issued in a hurried ceremony at the camp in Pannonia, felt foreign, heavy, awkward, the bronze plates cold against his tunic like a stranger's embrace. "This binds you to us," the quartermaster grunted, helping him buckle it. Lucius nodded, fingers tracing the basic fittings, unaware how it would anchor his every decision. That night, alone in his tent, he etched a small L into a plate with a nail, a tentative claim on his new identity. But then, homesickness struck. Letters home tucked into the pouch reminded him of his mother's tearful farewell. The belt controlling his solitude by holding these fragile connections close. Early campaigns tested him swiftly. Stationed along the Danube, Lucius marched into skirmishes against Marcomanni tribes, the cingulum proving its worth in the mud-choked forests. During one ambush, as arrows whistled through the leaves, he drew his gladius with a speed born of drills, the belt's hook releasing it flawlessly, allowing a thrust that felled an attacker. Blood spattered the apron strips, staining the leather in patterns that no polish could fully erase. Victory brought promotion to Miles Gregarious, and with it, a modest upgrade, a new plate engraved with the legion's emblem, an eagle clutching lightning. Lucius felt a swell of pride, but then doubt crept in. A comrade fell beside him, belt stripped by scavengers, a grim reminder that the cingulum controlled not just victory, but vulnerability. In quieter moments by the campfire, he'd finger the dent left by a deflected axe, whispering prayers to Mars, the god whose image he later added as a talisman. As years rolled on, Lucius's belt mirrored his personal conflicts, the human heartbeats beneath the military machine. In his mid-20s, during Nero's turbulent rule, he fell in love with a local woman in Carnuntum, a camp follower named Flavia. Their stolen meetings in the Vicus, the civilian settlement outside the fort, were laced with risk. Regulations frowned on such attachments. But the cingulum's pouch hid her gift-suppressed flower, a lock of hair that fueled his resolve. One fateful night, after a heated argument about his endless deployments, Flavia gifted him a silver stud for his belt, etched with intertwined vines, symbolizing unity. He affixed it secretly, the addition controlling his loyalty, a private rebellion against the empire's demands. But then, orders came for relocation to Judea during the Great Revolt in 66 after Christ. Parting tore at him. The belt, now heavier with her token, became a bittersweet anchor, pulling him forward while chaining his heart behind. In the scorching sands of Judea, under Vespasian's command, Lucius's cingulum faced its harshest trials. The siege of Jotapata was a nightmare of catapults and starvation. Lucius, now a seasoned fighter, used his belt's loops to secure extra rations, scavenged from fallen foes dried dates and hard cheese that sustained him through nights of vigil. During a breach in the walls, a Jewish defender's slingstone struck his apron, the metal boss cracking but holding, saving him from a crippling wound. Pain shot through him, but he pressed on, the gladius drawn in fury, the belt controlling his rage into disciplined strikes. Victory at Jerusalem in 70 after Christ brought spoils. Lucius claimed a gold inlay from a captured artifact, fusing it to his cingulum as a mark of triumph. Yet, the horrors lingered witnessing the temple's fall. Comrades lost to disease. The belt bore scars too, a slash across the leather from a desperate melee, mended with thread from a tentmate's kit. In letters Holmes still carried in the pouch he confided to Flavia. Now his wife via a hurried ceremony, how the cingulum felt like a curse and a charm, controlling his survival amid the ashes. Fatherhood added new layers. Back in Pannonia after the revolt, Lucius welcomed a son, naming him after his own father. The boy, wide-eyed at the gleaming belt, would play with the dangling strips during rare visits home. "This kept me alive for you," Lucius would say, letting the child buckle it loosely around his tiny waist, a game that masked deeper fears. But then, mutiny simmered in the ranks during Domitian's reign around 89 after Christ. Whispers of discontent over pay led to tense standoffs. Lucius, loyal but weary, used his ornate cingulum, now adorned with campaign clasps from Judea, to assert authority among doubters. It shined a subtle reminder of shared hardships. The belt controlled alliances here, its personal engravings, fostering trust. A comrade spotted Flavius Vinestud and shared his own hidden token, bonding them against the storm. Retirement loomed after 25 years, around 75 after Christ, but not without final trials. A border raid by Quadi tribes caught his unit off guard. Lucius, leading a small detachment, relied on the Pugio for close quarters defense when his gladius jammed. The dagger's quick release saved him, but a wound to his leg left him limping. Discharged with honors under Titus, he received a plot of land in Italia, the cingulum kept as a memento, hanging it above the hearth in his modest farm. It became a storyteller for his son, each plate a chapter, the dent from Jotapata, the gold from Jerusalem, Flavia's silver enduring all. But then, in quiet evenings, Lucius would don it again during festivals. The weight controlling nostalgia, a bridge between warrior and civilian. Lucius's tale, though one among millions, illuminates how the cingulum wove personal narratives into Rome's grand epic, controlling emotions, memories, and legacies with every strap and stud. Like Marcus polishing his own belt, Lucius found in it a mirror of life's twists, a humble controller of destiny. If this heartfelt journey through one man's belt-bound life is enveloping you in peaceful reflection, subscribe if you like the video. It's a warm invitation to more such intimate histories. Yet, Lucius's customizations hint at a broader canvas, the ways soldiers adorned their cinguli, turning uniformity into unique expressions. As his story fades into the embers, let's explore those adornments and personal touches where individuality bloomed amid the ranks. While the cingulum militare was born from standardization, a uniform emblem of Roman might. Soldiers like Lucius and our young Marcus found ways to infuse it with personal flair, turning a piece with a military issue into a canvas of self-expression that subtly controlled their sense of identity in a world of rigid conformity. These adornments weren't mere decorations. They were quiet acts of rebellion and remembrance, etched, affixed, or woven into the leather and metal, each one a story whispered against the empire's roar. Let's delve into this art of personalization, where the belt became a mirror to the soul, reflecting triumphs, loves, and losses in gleaming bronze and scarred hide, a gentle thread of humanity in the legion's iron weave dot at its foundation. Personalization began modestly, often with the tools at hand: a sharpened nail, a borrowed oar, or scraps from the camp smithy. Recruits like Marcus started simple, scratching initials or hometown symbols into the plates during idle evenings after drills. Imagine him, cross-legged by the tent flap under the flicker of an oil lamp, carving a crude olive branch to evoke his Etrurian roots, the metal yielding with a soft rasp that blended with the night's cricket chorus. Regulations permitted such touches, as long as they didn't undermine uniformity. Emperors like Augustus encouraged morale-boosting customizations, viewing them as binders of loyalty. Historical glimpses from writers like Pliny the Elder hint at this. Soldiers adorning belts with motifs from their provinces, a Gaulish boar here, an Egyptian scarab there, controlling cultural ties in distant postings. That's rank and experience. Grew, so did the sophistication. Veterans added campaign clasps, small metal tabs engraved with battle names or dates, hooked onto the belt's loops like medals. Lucius, after Judea, might have affixed one reading Jerusalem Kapath, the letters, hammered by a comrade artisan, its weight a tangible echo of siege horrors. But then, personalization deepened into the spiritual. Many etched invocations to gods Mars for valor, Fortuna for luck, turning the cingulum into a portable shrine. In the 2nd century under Hadrian, when syncretism blended Roman deities with local ones, a soldier in Britannia could add a Mithras bull-slaying scene, the intricate lines controlling his faith amid pagan wilds. These weren't frivolous. In battle's uncertainty, such adornments provided psychological armor, a belief that the belt held divine favor. Materials for these expressions came from scavenged spoils or traded goods, weaving the empire's diversity into personal narratives. Bronze was standard, but silver inlays prized from Iberian mines signaled status or windfalls from loot. Picture a centurion bartering for a gemstone bead in a Syrian marketplace, embedding it into his apron stud as a nod to a lover's eyes, the sparkle catching sunlight during parades. Gold, rarer and reserved for elites, appeared in filigree after Eastern conquests. Trajan stationed gold-flooded workshops, allowing lavish personalizations like intertwined serpents for healing gods. Yet, functionality reigned. Adornments couldn't hinder. A protruding gem might snag in combat, so soldiers filed them flush, balancing beauty with the belt's controlling practicality. The apron strips offered prime real estate for creativity, their dangling forms like blank scrolls. Soldiers tipped them with varied bosses, round for simplicity. Animals shaped for totems: a wolf for Rome's founders, a lion for courage. Lucius's might feature a vine motif from Flavia, evolving over years with added leaves for each child born. But then, conflicts arose. Over-ornamentation drew envy or discipline. A flashy belt could mark one for theft in camp, or earn a centurion's ire if deemed ostentatious. Punishments included forced removal of additions, stripping identity as surely as rank. This control fostered subtlety, hidden engravings on inner surfaces, like love poems or vows, visible only to the wearer. A private rebellion against the legion's gaze. Archaeological treasures illuminate these practices. From Vindeland, a fort in Britain, belt fragments show eclectic mixes, one with Celtic knots blended into Roman eagles, suggesting a native recruit's hybrid heritage. Another from Pompeii, preserved in volcanic ash, bears erotic phallic charms common, apotropaic symbols to ward off evil, controlling fate with humor and superstition. In the Rhine limes, a cingulum plate inscribed votive salvet, vow fulfilled, hints at a soldier's gratitude after survival, perhaps after the various disasters. Echoes. These finds reveal patterns. Early empire belts, more restrained, late ones under Severus Boulder with imported enamels in reds and blues, reflecting the army's growing multiculturalism. Personalization extended to repairs, turning scars into statements. A dented plate from a Parthian arrow might be hammered flat but left dimpled as a badge of resilience. A slashed strap mended with colorful thread from a conquered banner. Marcus, envisioning his future, might collect such mementos: a bead from a Germanic talk after a raid, affixed as a reminder of vigilance. Women influenced to camp followers like Flavia sewed protective charms into pouches, herbs, or tiny idols controlling health and fertility. For some, like auxiliary troops from Syria or Africa, adornments preserved ethnic identity: geometric patterns or animal motifs defying Roman assimilation, a subtle assertion in a controlling system. Yet this expression wasn't without peril. During mutinies, like the Pannonian Revolt in 14 after Christ, personalized belts identified ringleaders, unique engravings leading to executions. In calmer times, they fostered bonds. Soldiers traded techniques around the fire, a Thracian teaching filigree, an Egyptian sharing enamel recipes. Lucius might have mentored Marcus types, saying, "Adorn it wisely, it controls how the world sees you and how you see yourself." Over time, these touches accumulated, the cingulum aging with its owner. Plates replaced but spirit enduring. In essence, adornments transformed the belt from tool to talisman, controlling morale in an impersonal machine. They allowed whispers of self amid orders, shouts, a personalization that humanized the harsh dot. If this exploration of personal flourishes is painting vivid pictures in your mind's eye, subscribe if you like the video. It's a personal touch that keeps these stories adorned and alive. But even the most cherished adornments paled against the terror of loss. As individuality's glow dims, let's confront the severe punishments where losing the cingulum meant losing honor, a descent into disgrace that bound men tighter than any strap. A descent into disgrace that bound men tighter than any strap. In the unforgiving world of Roman military discipline, where the cingulum represented not just utility but the very essence of a soldier's honor, losing it whether through negligence, defeat, or deliberate penalty was a catastrophe that shattered lives, controlling behavior through the specter of shame and stripping away the core of one's identity. For men like Lucius, who had poured their souls into adorning their belts, or young Marcus, still learning its weight, the threat of such punishments loomed like a constant shadow, a tool of command that maintained order in the ranks more effectively than whips or chains. Let's ease into these darker corners of legionary life, where the removal of the cingulum wasn't merely a loss of gear but a profound humiliation. echoing through camps and battlefields as a warning woven into the fabric of Roman resilience. Roman military law, codified in works like the Digest of Justinian centuries later but rooted in republican traditions, viewed the cingulum as sacrosanct, a symbol of citizenship, duty, and manhood. To lose it involuntarily was to be unmanned, reduced to the status of a civilian or worse, a slave. Punishments involving the belt ranged from temporary deprivation to permanent confiscation, each calibrated to fit the crime and instill terror. Consider the minor infractions first. A soldier like Marcus, caught dozing on watch during a quiet night along the limes, might face the vitis, the centurion's vine staff, or a beating, but if negligence led to a lost weapon, his cingulum could be seized for days. Forced to march and drill without it, weapons bundled clumsily in arms or tied with rope, he became a laughingstock, the absence controlling his every awkward step. A public lesson in vigilance that burned deeper than bruises, but graver offenses invited harsher measures. Desertion, that cardinal sin plaguing legions from the Punic Wars onward, often resulted in decimation, where 1 in 10 men was executed by lot, but survivors or recaptured fugitives faced the ritual stripping of their cinguli before the assembled troops. Imagine the scene in a camp under Augustus's reforms around 10 before Christ, a deserter dragged before the Principia, his belt unbuckled by the centurion amid jeers and silence, the leather ripped away, plates clattering to the ground like fallen dreams, leaving him exposed, tunic sagging, weapons confiscated. This degradation wasn't just physical, it symbolized expulsion from the military family, controlling future conduct through collective memory. Historical echoes from Tacitus's annals describe such events during the Batavian Revolt in 69 after Christ, where mutineers had their belts burned publicly, the acrid smoke a sensory reminder of lost honor, forcing others to clutch their own, singly tighter in loyalty. The belt's loss extended to battlefield failures, where defeat stripped victors of spoils and the vanquished of dignity. In the aftermath of Teutoburg Forest in 9 after Christ, where 3 legions were annihilated by Arminius's Germans, the few survivors returned beltless gear looted by enemies who paraded the cinguli as trophies, twisting Roman symbols into barbarian boasts. For those captured and later ransomed, reintegration meant starting anew with plain recruits' belts, their ornate ones gone, controlling their status as marked men, forever under suspicion. Lucius might have witnessed a similar fate in Judea, a comrade accused of cowardice during a siege, his cingulum confiscated and redistributed to a worthier soldier. The act performed at dawn assembly. The punished man, now beltless, was assigned menial tasks, cleaning latrines, hauling water, his shame, controlling the cohort's morale, a deterrent more potent than death. As living in disgrace was a slower torment, even officers weren't immune. Centurions, whose elaborate belts signified command, faced amplified humiliations during the year of the 4 emperors in 69 after Christ. Rival factions stripped opposing leaders of their cinguli in purges, demoting them to common ranks or executing them beltless to deny martial honors in death. One plausible tale, inspired by Suetonius's accounts of Domitian's paranoia, tells of a centurion named Gaius, falsely accused of plotting before the eagle's standard. His silver-inlaid cingulum was torn off, plates smashed underfoot, the sound echoing like breaking bones. Gaius, reduced to a Tyrones, endured floggings without his symbol of authority, the loss controlling his spirit until he proved innocence through suicidal valor in battle, earning a replacement belt scarred but restored. Such stories circulated in whispers, binding the ranks through fear of falling. Punishments often incorporated ritual elements, amplifying psychological impact. The fustuarium clubbed to death by comrades sometimes began with belt removal, the victim stripped of protection, apron no longer deflecting blows. In lesser cases, like theft within the tent, the offender's cingulum was defaced, engravings filed away, personal adornments melted down, leaving a blank slate that controlled identity erasure. Marcus in his early days might have seen a pilferer forced to wear a mock belt of rags, parading through camp to GRs, the humiliation ensuring no repeat offenses. Women and families felt the ripple. A disgraced soldier's wife like Flavia bore the stigma, her husband's lost cingulum signaling reduced pensions or social ostracism, controlling household fortunes from afar. Archaeology unveils these severities. Belt fragments from punitive sites, like execution grounds near forts, show deliberate damage, buckles, twisted leather/tazif, violence extended to the symbol itself. One find from a Rhine camp includes a plate inscribed, infamous, likely affixed to a punished man's gear as a badge of shame, controlling his interactions like a scarlet letter. Yet, redemption paths existed, softening the control. A beltless soldier could reclaim honor through extraordinary deeds, saving a comrade, capturing an enemy standard, earning a new cingulum in ceremony, plates bestowed like forgiveness. Lucius, ever the mentor, might advise a shamed youth. The belt is lost, but honor can be reforged stronger in the fire. This balance of terror and hope made punishments effective, maintaining discipline across vast frontiers. In these tales of loss, The cingulum's power as controller shines darkest, binding men not through presence but absence, a void that echoed louder than any adornment. It taught that honor was fragile, easily unbuckled, yet reclaimable with grit. If this somber reflection on disgrace's depths is guiding you toward contemplative rest, subscribe if you like the video. It's a subtle link to more layers of these ancient binds. But punishments evolved as the empire did, mirroring shifts in the early centuries. As the sting of loss lingers, let's trace that evolution in the early empire. Through the 1st and 2nd centuries, where the cingulum adapted to new emperors and expanding horizons. As Rome transitioned from the turbulent late Republic into the stable Principate under Augustus and his successors, the military belt underwent subtle yet profound changes, mirroring the empire's growth from a Mediterranean power to a colossal dominion stretching across 3 continents. For soldiers like Lucius, who served through the shifts of the 1st century, or Marcus, born into this era of consolidation, the cingulum evolved, not in dramatic leaps but in steady refinements, materials refined, design standardized, and symbolism deepened, controlling the legion's unity amid vast expansions. Let's drift through these transformative years. From the 1st century after Christ under the Julio-Claudians to the 2nd under the Flavians and Adoptives, where the belt became a barometer of imperial stability, its leather and metal echoing the rhythms of conquest and reform in a world of marble cities and frontier forts. Augustus, the architect of the empire, set the tone for this evolution in the late 1st century before Christ and early 1st after, reforming the army into a professional standing force of 28 legions. The cingulum, once varied in republican chaos, was standardized, wider bands of consistent leather, thickness about 6 centimeters, reinforced with uniform bronze plates cast in imperial workshops. Picture the forges in Rome's Aventine Hill, hammers ringing softly in the dawn mist as artisans stamped each fitting with the imperial eagle, a symbol of Augustus's divine favor. This wasn't mere aesthetics, it controlled allegiance, binding soldiers to the emperor rather than individual generals, as had plagued the late Republic with civil wars. Lucius, enlisting under Claudius around 41 after Christ, would have received one of these early imperial models, sleeker with improved buckles for quicker adjustments, reflecting lessons from Germanic campaigns, where swift gear shifts saved lives. Materials advanced with the empire's trade networks. Bronze remained dominant, but tin from Britannia's mines conquered in 43 after Christ enhanced alloys for greater durability against corrosion in humid frontiers. Leather sourcing expanded too. Hides from Gallic cattle farms provided some bases tanned with imported oak bark from Hispania, yielding a smoother texture that reduced chafing on long patrols. The apron strips lengthened slightly, now often 6 to 8 in number, their studs evolving from simple domes to embossed patterns like laurel wreaths, commemorating victories such as the Claudian invasion. But then, functionality drove changes. Hooks were redesigned with springier mechanisms, allowing easier attachment of the increasingly heavy gladius variants. In the year of the 4 emperors in 69 after Christ, a whirlwind of chaos after Nero's fall, the cingulum's evolution accelerated. Vespasian, emerging victorious, mandated inspections to ensure belts bore no marks of prior loyalties, controlling political purity through erasure and redash engraving. Drifting into the Flavian era, under Vespasian and his sons Titus and Domitian, from 69 to 96 after Christ, the belt reflected economic booms from Judean spoils and Dacian gold. Silver accents became more common for ranked canfile, not just officers' thin platings, affordable due to expanded mining, adding a subtle gleam that boosted morale in the Colosseum's shadow. Lucius, campaigning in Judea, might have upgraded his cingulum with such silver after Jerusalem's fall in 70. The metal's cool touch, a reminder of hard-won peace. Designs incorporated architectural motifs, plates mimicking the arch of Titus's reliefs, with engraved scenes of triumphs, controlling propaganda by carrying imperial narratives on every soldier's hip. Yet, practicality persisted. The Pugio dagger's suspension shifted slightly lower for better balance in the testudo formation, honed during Domitian's Chattan Wars in Germania around 83 after Christ, where dense forests demanded agile gear. The 2nd century brought the golden age of the adoptive emperors Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius from 98 to 180 after Christ. When the cingulum reached its classical peak, Trajan's conquests in Dacia from 101 to 106 flooded Rome with gold, funding ornate evolutions. Gem inlays like carnelian from India or amber from the Baltic, traded via the Silk Road's extensions. Soldiers' belts now featured modular plates, easily replaced after battle damage, controlling maintenance costs in an army swollen to over 30 legions. Hadrian's reforms emphasized defense. His famous wall in Britannia, built around 122, saw singly adapted for static duty extra pouches for tools like surveying chains, the leather treated with beeswax for waterproofing against relentless rains. Feel the shift. A soldier on the wall, fingering his belt's new clasp shaped like a rosette, symbolizing the Empire's fortified bloom. The metal warmed by a rare sunbeam piercing the fog. Personalization flourished in this stable era, but within bounds Hadrian's edicts limited extravagance to prevent division, controlling unity through subtle guidelines. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor reigning from 161 to 180, influenced a Stoic aesthetic. Belts with engraved maxims like virtues et honos, virtue and honor, drawn from his meditations, though not directly, inspiring soldiers amid Marcomannic wars along the Danube. Lucius's son, perhaps serving then, might inherit a cingulum blending old Judean gold with new Germanic influences, studs, mimicking barbarian torques, integrated as trophies. But then, challenges arose. Plagues in the 160s decimated ranks, leading to lighter designs, thinner leather from African sources to ease burdens on weakened men, controlling endurance in crisis. Archaeological sites chronicle this evolution vividly. From Pompeii's ruins, frozen in 79 after Christ, come Flavian era belts with volcanic preserved details, colorful enamel inlays, and novelty from Eastern trade. Along Hadrian's Wall, digs reveal 2nd century variants with reinforced aprons, dents from Pictish skirmishes telling tales of adaptation. One artifact from Aquincum in Pannonia bears an inscription leg Segundo a Deu Traex, linking it to Trajan's legions. Its plates a mosaic of imperial progression. Through these centuries, the cingulum wasn't static. It flowed with Rome's fortune, standardized under Augustus for control, enriched under Trajan for glory, fortified under Hadrian for longevity. It bound soldiers to an evolving ideal. Its change is a quiet narrative of empire's pulse. Marcus, rising in this world, would buckle his updated belt each dawn, feeling the legacy of refinement in every strap. If this gentle unfolding of imperial evolution is soothing your thoughts like a warm Mediterranean breeze, subscribe if you like the video. Eats a timeless connection to these enduring tales. Yet, as the empire peaked, its belts carried men to the edges of the known world. With horizons broadening, let's venture to those frontiers, where life along the limes tested the cingulum's limits in isolation and vigilance. In isolation and vigilance, the limes, those vast frontier zones marking the empire's agesk like the Rhine-Danube line in Germania or Hadrian's Wall in distant Britannia, where Roman soldiers truly lived. The cingulum's unyielding control, far from the marble forums of Rome, in a world of watchtowers, ditches, and endless horizons. For Marcus, reassigned to a fort along the Upper Rhine in the 2nd century after Christ, under Trajan's expansive gaze, the belt that had carried him through training and marches now anchored him to this liminal existence, a constant reminder of duty amid barbarian whispers and the slow creep of boredom. Picture the wooden palisades rising against misty forests, the air sharp with pine and river damp, as legionaries patrolled these boundaries, their singly jangling softly like sentinels in the wind. Here, the belt wasn't just gear, it controlled survival in isolation, binding men to their posts through routine, resilience, and the ever-present threat of the unknown beyond the wall. Life on the limes demanded a different rhythm from the heartlands. Drills or Italy's roads of vigilant stasis, where the cingulum's practicality shone in the daily grind of border defense. Marcus, arriving at a castrum like Vindonissa in modern Switzerland, would buckle his belt at first light, its weight familiar yet heavier in the chilled dawn air that seeped through his woolen cloak. The fort's routine began with inspections, centurions eyeing each man's cingulum for signs of wear, plates polished to deter rust from the perpetual fog, loops secure for the tools of frontier work. This wasn't parade ground pomp, it was necessity. The belt held not only weapons but essentials. For patrolling, a small oil flask for lamps during night watches, a pouch with wax tablets for recording signals from distant towers. In these remote outposts, supply lines stretched thin, so the cingulum controlled self-sufficiency, its compartments stuffed with dried meat or medicinal herbs gathered from local woods, warding off the scurvy that plagued idle garrisons. Patrols defined the day's endless circuits along the limes fortifications, ditches 15 meters wide, earthen ramparts topped with stakes, and mile castles punctuating the line like beads on a string. Marcus would march in small detachments, the apron strips of his belt swaying with each step over uneven terrain, their metal tips glinting as warnings to any lurking raiders. The Rhine's banks, swollen in spring floods, tested the gear. Wading, shallow crossings, the leather resisted water thanks to Hadrian-era treatments with animal fats. But a soaked pouch could mean lost rations, a minor disaster in isolation. Historical records from the Historia Augusta evoke these vigils. Soldiers under Antiochus in the mid-2nd century scanning for Alemanni tribes, their singly securing signal horns or fire-starting flints, tools that could summon reinforcements with a blast or spark. But then, ambushes lurked. A sudden arrow from the trees might glance off a plate, the belt's subtle armor saving a life. As happened in countless skirmishes along the Rhine limes, construction consumed much of the time. for the limes were living barriers, ever expanding under emperors like Trajan and Hadrian. Marcus, assigned to a work gang, used his cingulum's hooks to carry a dalabra axe or leveling rod, hacking at turf or hauling timber for watchtowers that dotted the horizon every few kilometers. The belt's wide band supported his back during these labors, preventing strains that could sideline a man in a place where replacements were months away. Imagine the scene, under a leaden sky in Germania Superior. Men digging a vallum ditch 20 meters deep, sweat mixing with rain, the jingle of aprons a rhythmic accompaniment to grunts and orders. Yet, the cingulum controlled more than physical toil. It enforced hierarchy in these mixed garrisons of legionaries and auxiliaries, native troops from Syria or Thrace whose belts bore ethnic twists, like curved dagger sheaths, fostering a fragile unity amid cultural clashes. Off-shift hours brought a semblance of normalcy, but even then the belt rarely left the waist, regulations demanding readiness against nocturnal incursions. In the fort's bathhouse, steam rising from hypercost floors, soldiers might loosen straps but keep pugios near. The cingulum hung on pegs yet within arm's reach. Markets in the adjacent Vica civilian settlements offered diversions, trading for local amber beads to adorn plates, or bartering belt repairs with Germanic smiths who eyed the Roman designs with wary admiration. Lucius, in his later years perhaps posted to the Syrian limes under Marcus Aurelius, would have shared tales around the mess hall fire. How his cingulum's Judean gold clasp once bought favor with a Bedouin trader, exchanging for spices that flavored bland frontier porridge. But then, isolation bred vices. Gambling with dice from the pouch led to debts, and a lost bet might mean pawning a plate, inviting punishment if discovered. Conflicts with the beyond tested the belt's limits. Raids by Quadio Marcomanni during the Marcomannic Wars from 106 to 180 after Christ turned patrols into pitched fights. Marcus, now seasoned, drew his gladius mid-stride, the belt's suspension allowing seamless action while dodging spears. One fictional but grounded anecdote: a night assault on a Danube fort where a soldier's apron deflected a thrown javelin, the stud embedding in wood instead of flesh, buying time for counterattack. Yet, defeat scarred, captured belts adorned barbarian chiefs, as seen in reliefs on Trajan's column, controlling Roman morale through visible loss. Redeeming such items in truces became obsessions, the cingulum symbolizing reclaimed honor. Communities softened the harshness. Families often joined, women like Flavia mending belts with local threads, children playing with discarded studs. Religious shrines along the limes altars to Mithras in underground chambers saw soldiers dedicating cingulum fragments as votives, controlling faith through offerings. Archaeology from sites like Salzburg in Germany reveals this life. Belts with mixed Roman barbarian engravings, pouches containing frontier trinkets like bone dice or herbal amulets, dents from local skirmishes telling silent stories dotting these edges. The cingulum was lifeline and leash, controlling vigilance in a world where Rome faded into wilderness. It bound men to their lonely watch, a thread of empire in the vast unknown. Marcus, gazing over the ramparts at twilight, felt its pulse: security and solitude, duty and desolation. If this frontier vigil's quiet intensity is lulling you into a borderland of dreams, subscribe if you like the video. It's a sentinel call for more such edge of empire echoes. But frontiers blurred into personal realms, where the belt lingered even off-duty. As the limes mists dissipate, let's slip into those moments outside the line, where the cingulum shaped lives beyond the watch. Where the cingulum shaped lives beyond the watch, even in those rare pockets of respite. When the bugle fell silent and the weight of vigilance lifted slightly, the belt remained a steadfast presence, weaving into the fabric of a soldier's off-duty hours like an unspoken rule that controlled leisure as much as labor. For Marcus, stationed at that Rhine fort, off-duty didn't mean freedom. It meant a shift from public duty to personal rhythms, where the cingulum lingered as a reminder of identity, a tool for relaxation, and sometimes a bridge to the civilian world just beyond the ramparts. Imagine the fading light of a late afternoon, the fort's gates creaking open to the vicus below, where merchants hawked wares and families gathered. Here, the belt wasn't unbuckled but adapted, its gleam softened in the glow of oil lamps as soldiers sought solace in games, baths, and quiet companionships, all under its subtle sway. Off-duty began typically with the evening meal in the mess hall or around a contubernium fire, where the cingulum transitioned seamlessly from workhorse to companion. Marcus would loosen the buckle just a notch enough for comfort after a day's patrol, but never remove it fully, as regulations in frontier forts like his demanded partial readiness, controlling even repose against sudden alarms. The pouch, that versatile loculus, yielded treasures for these moments, dice carved from bone for a game of tally, where bets of small coins clinked against the apron strips like echoes of distant battles. Picture the scene: men laughing over posk wine, the belts, plates, reflecting firelight as stories flowed of home or conquests. For Lucius, in his time, such gatherings might involve passing around a shared pugio for carving meat, the dagger's hilt worn smooth from countless uses, a mundane act that reinforced bonds without the edge of combat. Baths offered a deeper unwind, the thermae in larger forts like Carnuntum on the Danube providing steamy havens where steam curled from caldarium pools heated by underfloor high. Here, soldiers finally unbuckled their cingulum, hanging them on wall pegs amid the scent of olive oil and herbs. But even then, the belt controlled the space. Its absence felt like vulnerability. Weapons left in arm's reach while bodies soaked away the grime of Lime's life. Marcus, dipping into the warm waters after a muddy patrol, might glance at his suspended cingulum, its engravings of home evoking a pang of nostalgia amid the chatter of comrades sharing gossip from Rome. But then, luxury crept in. Wealthier veterans like centurions brought scented oils to polish their plates during these sessions, turning maintenance into ritual. The shine restored under flickering lamps as tales of off-duty escapades unfolded, perhaps a furtive visit to a local tavern, belt adjusted to conceal a hidden flask. The vicus, that bustling civilian enclave hugging the fort's walls, blurred the lines between duty and downtime, and the cingulum navigated this gray area with authority. Soldiers ventured out in tunics, belts firmly in place as the law required, marking them as off-limits to certain vices while enabling others. Marcus might stroll the muddy streets, his apron clinking softly as he bartered for fresh bread or a trinket at a store run by Germanic traders, the belt's pouch safeguarding his meager pesos 30 earned from months of watch. Interactions with locals added layers. A flirtation with a merchant's daughter could lead to exchange tokens of beads strung onto a loop, personalizing the cingulum further, controlling affections in a life of transience. Historical vignettes from Pliny the Younger's letters hint at such minglings. Soldiers in OFA years attending festivals, their belts gleaming amid civilian garb, symbols of protection that deterred trouble while inviting respect or envy from the populace. Yet off-duty carried risks, and the belt often mediated them. Gambling dens in the vicus tempted with higher stakes, where a lost wager might mean pawning a plate, inviting disciplinary scrutiny back at the fort. Lucius, ever cautious, might have warned younger men like Marcus, the cingulum controls your fortune, guarded like your life. Intoxication posed another peril. Overindulgence in mulsum honey wine could lead to brawls, where the Puggio's quick draw from the belt turned revelry into regret, as regulations punished unsanctioned violence harshly. In quieter pursuits, the belt facilitated hobbies. A soldier, whittling wood with his dagger during downtime, carving miniatures to send home, or using the sturdy strap to secure a fishing line along the Rhine's banks, where catches supplemented rations. These moments humanized the machine. Marcus netting a silvery perch under a setting sun, his cingulum's weight grounding him in simple joys amid the empire's edge. Family life, for those fortunate enough to have it intertwined deeply with the belt's off-duty role. Married soldiers, permitted under Septimius Severus's later reforms but common earlier in practice, brought wives and children into the vicus, where the cingulum became a household emblem. Picture Flavia Lucius's wife, polishing his belt by hearthlight in their modest insular apartment, her fingers tracing the vine motifs she inspired, controlling domestic harmony through care. Children played with discarded studs, fashioning toy swords, while fathers like Lucius buckled miniature versions for pretend parades, instilling early discipline. But then, separations loomed. Deployments pulled men away, the belt carrying letters or locks of hair in its pouch, controlling emotional ties across distances. Tragedies struck too, a fever claiming a child. The father's cingulum hung in mourning, its gleam dulled as a mark of grief. Religious observances filled offers with solemnity, the cingulum integrating into rituals at fort shrines dedicated to Mithras, popular among frontier troops, involved underground initiations where belts were blessed, plates offered as votives for safe watches. Marcus might participate in such a ceremony, the belt's engravings invoking protection during a torchlit feast, controlling spiritual solace in isolation. Festivals like Saturnalia brought revelry roles reversed, slaves donning mock cinguli in jest, a brief subversion that reinforced the belt's everyday control. Archaeology from sites like Vindolanda preserves these off-duty glimpses. Belts with gaming counters and pouches, love tokens etched into hidden surfaces, where patterns from leisurely wear. One tablet invites a comrade to a birthday dinner, mentioning "bring your belt for the games," underscoring its omnipresence. In these respites, the cingulum wasn't shed but softened, controlling leisure with the same quiet authority as duty. It bridged worlds, military and personal, Roman and local, allowing breaths of normalcy in a controlled existence. Marcus, returning to barracks at dusk, rebuckled tightly, the transition seamless, duty's shadow ever near. If this peek into off-duty whispers is easing you into a cozy haze, subscribe if you like the video. It's a relaxed way to invite more of these unwinding narratives. But the belt's influence rippled further, touching women and families in profound ways. As off-duty lights dim, let's follow those threads homeward, where the cingulum's shadow fell on hearths and hearts alike. Where the cingulum's shadow fell on hearths and hearts alike. In the intimate spheres of home and family, Far from the clatter of the fort or the vigilance of the limes, the Roman soldier's belt extended its subtle control, shaping relationships, households, and legacies through the women and children who orbited the military life. For Marcus, whose postings allowed fleeting reunions with a wife he married in a hasty ceremony during leave, or for Lucius, whose bond with Flavia endured deployments and dangers, the cingulum wasn't left at the barracks door. It infiltrated the domestic realm, a symbol of provision, protection, and sometimes strain, weaving the empire's demands into the warmth of family bonds. Let's settle into these homeward tales, where the belt influenced not just the warrior, but the web of lives, intertwined with his gentle undercurrent of influence that balanced love with loyalty in the glow of oil lamps and shared meals. Roman military families were a mosaic of resilience, often forming in the shadow of the legions. Despite official bans on marriage for serving soldiers until Severus's reforms in the late 2nd century after Christ. Before then, unions were common law, with women like Flavia following as concubinae or camp followers, settling in the vicus where the cingulum's presence loomed large. Marcus might return from patrol to a modest dwelling, unbuckling his belt, with a sigh as his wife, let's call her Aaliyah, greeted him with a bowl of stew simmered over a brazier. The belt, hung on a peg by the door, became a household guardian, its gladius sheathed but ready, deterring thieves in these frontier towns, rife with Aaliyah, practical and steadfast, would polish its plates during his absences, her hands tracing the engravings he added for their unborn child, a small cradle symbol etched after news of her pregnancy, controlling hopes for the future amid uncertain postings. Women wielded indirect power through the belt, transforming it from martial tool to family talisman. Flavia, in Lucius's story, sewed protective charms into the pouch-dried lavender for calm, a tiny Juno figurine for safe births, and the cingulum with domestic magic that he carried into battle, controlling his mindset with reminders of home. In return, spoils affixed to the belt funded the hearth, a silver stud from Judean loot sold for grain, or a gem inlay traded for wool to clothe their son. But then, tensions arose. Absences strained bonds, the belt a bitter symbol of the empire's claim on her husband. Letters tucked in its folds brought news of delays, controlling her daily worries as she managed the home alone, bartering in the vicus with the authority borrowed from his status. Historical insights from inscriptions on altars dedicated by soldiers' wives reveal this dynamic. One from a Rhine fort reads, "To the gods of home." From Claudia, wife of Centurion Maximus, likely offered with a fragment of his cingulum as a vow for his safe return. Children grew under the belt's influence, viewing it as both plaything and portent. Lucius's son, young and curious, would beg to wear the unbuckled cingulum around his tiny frame during evening stories, the heavy apron dragging on the dirt floor as he mimicked marchers, controlling early aspirations toward military life. Fathers used it pedagogically. Marcus might demonstrate buckling techniques to his offspring, explaining how the loops held not just weapons but responsibility, instilling discipline in games that echoed training fields. Yet, the cingulum cast shadows too. Daughters excluded from the legions learned its weight through absence, helping mothers mend straps torn in skirmishes, their small fingers stitching leather that controlled family fortunes. In blended households come in with auxiliaries from diverse provinces. Children of mixed heritage played with hybrid adornments, a Celtic knot on a Roman plate symbolizing unity, controlling cultural fusion in the home. Domestic conflicts often centered on the belt, its demands rippling into marital strife. Aaliyah might argue with Marcus over his reluctance to retire. The cingulum scars from frontier raids, a visual testament to risks that endangered their family. "That thing controls you more than I do," she might whisper in frustration, pointing to the dented plate from a recent ambush. But then, reconciliation came through shared rituals, polishing sessions by the fire, where hands met over metal, forging intimacy amid the grind. For widows, the belt became inheritance. A widow, like one recorded in Egyptian papyri from the 2nd century, receiving her husband's cingulum as part of his will, selling its valuables to sustain the household, controlling grief through practicality. Families of fallen soldiers sometimes buried belts with the dead, as seen in graves along the limes, plates inscribed with familial dedications, ensuring the symbol accompanied them to the afterlife. The cingulum influenced women's roles beyond her home, empowering them in the vicus economy. Many ran stalls selling belt accessories, oils for leather, studs for repairs, drawing on knowledge gleaned from their partners. Flavia, perhaps, crafted custom engravings for a stall, a hub where soldiers traded stories, controlling social networks that supported isolated families. In times of crisis, like the Antonine Plague sweeping frontiers in the 160s after Christ, women used pouch herbs for remedies, the belt's compartments, distributing aid among kin, controlling health in quarantined homes. Yet legal limbo haunted these unions. Children born before official marriage risked illegitimacy, the father's cingulum serving as proof of paternity in disputes, its personal marks testifying to bonds unrecognized by Rome. Personal anecdotes humanize this influence. Consider a tale inspired by Vindolanda tablets, A wife named Sulpicia writing to her sister about her husband's belt. He sends a new clasp for your boy. May it bring him strength as it has my love. Such exchanges controlled familial ties across provinces for Marcus and Aaliyah. A quiet evening might involve her adding a thread-woven band to his apron, colored with dyes from local markets, a feminine touch softening the martial edge. Children listened to bedtime lore of the belt's origins, myths of Romulus girding for war, controlling heritage through storytelling. In essence, the cingulum's reach into homes made it a family heirloom, controlling legacies beyond the soldier. It bound wives to waiting, children to aspiration, hearths to the horizon of duty as silent controller of domestic destinies. If this tender exploration of home's heart is wrapping you in familial warmth, subscribe if you like the video. A homey gesture that nurtures these ongoing narratives. But as empires aged, so did their symbols. The cingulum faced transformations in the waning centuries. With family threads lingering, let's turn to those changes in the late empire, from the 3rd to 5th centuries, where crises reshaped the belt and the lives it governed. As the Roman Empire entered its twilight in the 3rd century after Christ, battered by invasions, economic turmoil, and internal strife, the cingulum militare mirrored these upheavals, evolved from a symbol of disciplined unity into a more pragmatic, varied accessory that adapted to a fragmenting world, controlling soldiers' identities amid chaos and reform. For veterans like Lucius, retiring just as the storm brewed, or for Marcus, whose career spanned into this era of emperors like Diocletian and Constantine, the belt transformed under pressure. Its leather tougher, its fittings simpler, yet still anchoring men to duty in an age when Rome itself seemed unbuckled. Let's trace this shifting landscape from the crisis of the 3rd century through the 4th and into the 5th, where the cingulum endured invasions and innovations, a resilient thread in the unraveling tapestry of empire, whispering continuity amid the winds of change. The 3rd century dawned with anarchy, the barracks emperors rising and falling in rapid succession, from Severus Alexander's assassination in 235 to Aurelian's brief stabilization around 270. Legions, once professional, became mercenary-like, and the cingulum reflected this volatility. Standardization frayed with supply chains disrupted by Persian incursions and Gothic raids. Soldiers scavenged fittings from fallen comrades or local smiths, leading to eclectic designs, bronze mixed with cheaper iron plates hammered crudely without imperial eagles. Marcus, perhaps promoted to optio by now, might have mended his belt with wire from a sacked Palmyran caravan during Aurelian's eastern campaigns in 272, the makeshift repair controlling functionality in a time when workshops lay in ruins. Leather grew thicker, sourced from whatever herds survived barbarian plunders, treated hastily with animal tallow to withstand the harsher climates of fragmented frontiers. The apron strips shortened for mobility, as cavalry rose in prominence, comitatus mobile units favoring lighter gear over infantry's heavy clink. But then deeper changes stirred under Diocletian, who ascended in 284 and reformed the empire into the tetrarchy, dividing rule to stem the tide. The cingulum became part of his military overhaul, belts standardized again, but with a bureaucratic edge, serial numbers etched into buckles for inventory, controlling accountability in an army, bloated to over 500,000 men. Materials shifted to economy. Bronze gave way to tinned iron for a silvery sheen without the cost, mined from strained British and Dacian sources. Poggio daggers elongated into Spathe longswords for border troops, requiring redesigned hooks that hung lower, adapting to an influx of Germanic recruits whose fighting styles influenced Roman tactics. In the forts along the Persian limes, soldiers like Marcus donned these updated sigli, their plates now stamped with tetrarchic portraits, Diocletian and Maximian side by side, symbolizing shared power, yet controlling loyalty through visual reminders of the new order. The 4th century brought Constantine's revolution, from his victory at Milvian Bridge in 312 to the founding of Constantinople in 330, blending Christianity with old pagan ways. The cingulum absorbed this cultural fusion. Engravings evolved from Mars motifs to Chi-Rho symbols after Constantine's vision, a cross-like monogram etched discreetly to invoke divine protection without alienating traditionalists. Lucius's grandson, serving in this era, might have added such a mark during the Gothic Wars under Valens around 376. The belt's pouch holding a small crucifix alongside Fortuna's wheel, controlling spiritual allegiance in a Christianizing army. Designs grew more ornate for elites, the comitatus's field armies with gold leaf from African mines, while Limitinae border troops made do with plainer versions, widening the gap between mobile and static forces. The apron, once protective, became largely decorative, strips reduced to 4 or fewer, as Larica Hamata chainmail extended lower, rendering old defenses obsolete. Yet, functionality persisted. Loops now secured sagate arrows for archers, reflecting the rise of missile troops against mounted invaders like the Huns. Invasions accelerated change, the cingulum adapting to survival. The sack of Rome by Alaric's Visigoths in 410 echoed earlier breaches, like the Alemanni crossing the frozen Rhine in 366. Soldiers fled with belts intact, but many were looted, their plates melted into barbarian talks. Marcus, if alive into his 50s, could have witnessed this in the western provinces. His cingulum scarred from clashes with Franks, its leather patched with hides from captured foes. The belt controlled mobility, now lighter for rapid retreats. Pouches expanded for coins amid hyperinflation under emperors like Honorius in the east, under Theodosius from 379 to 395. Byzantine influences crept in. Belts with buckles inspired by Sassanid Persian styles, curved and jeweled, blending enemy aesthetics to control alliances with foederati barbarian allies integrated into the ranks by the 5th century. As the Western Empire crumbled, Romulus Augustulus deposed in 476. The cingulum fragmented along with Rome, in Gaul, and Hispania. Romano-barbarian kingdoms rose. Soldiers' belts hybridizing, Roman plates fused with Germanic fibulae brooches, controlling identity in a post-imperial world. In the enduring East, under Justinian from 527, the cingulum persisted in the thema system, but simplified iron dominant, aprons vestigial, as heavy infantry yielded to cataphract cavalry. Personal stories endured. A hypothetical descendant of Marcus, serving in Ravenna's guard, might pass his worn cingulum to a son enlisting with Odoacer's forces. The engravings faded but tales vivid. It held Rome together, even as it fell. Archaeological finds from this era, like those in the Thames hoard or Danubian graves, show this decline. Belts buried with owners, plates corroded, yet hooks intact, whispering of endurance. Women and families felt these shifts acutely. With legions more localized, belts became heirlooms sooner, controlling legacies as sons inherited gear amid collapsing pensions. Flavia's equivalents wove Christian threads into pouches, adapting old charms to new faiths. The cingulum through crises remained a controller, less gleaming, more scarred, binding fragments of Rome in dissolution. If this melancholic glide through the empire's fade is drawing you into reflective repose, subscribe if you like the video. A fading echo that calls for more twilight tales. But relics of these changes persist, unearthed in modern digs that breathe life into leather and bronze. As the late empire's dusk settles, let's unearth those archaeological finds, where the past's whispers emerge from soil and time. These relics, unearthed from the earth's quiet embrace, belt fragments buried in forgotten forts, plates scattered across ancient battlefields, offer tangible echoes of the cingulum's enduring legacy, piecing together the lives it controlled long after the empire's fall. For soldiers like Marcus, whose own belt might one day join these artifacts, or Lucius, whose tales fade into legend, archaeology bridges the centuries, revealing how this humble accessory survived floods, fires, and the plow of progress, to speak of Roman resilience. Let's sift through these discoveries gently, like an excavator brushing away layers of soil under a soft sun, uncovering stories etched in metal and leather that connect us to the hands that once buckled them. A serene excavation of history's hidden treasures. Modern archaeology began unearthing these singly in earnest during the 19th century, as European scholars dug into Roman sites with newfound fervor, inspired by the Renaissance's revival of classical antiquity. One of the earliest significant finds came from Pompeii, preserved in volcanic ash since Vesuvius's eruption in 79 after Christ. A soldier's belt frozen in time, its bronze plates still gleaming faintly amid the ruins of a barracks. Imagine the moment of discovery. Italian archaeologists in 1860 carefully lifting the cingulum from the ashen soil, its apron strips intact with studied tips that once clinked through the city streets. This artifact, now in Naples National Archaeological Museum, shows early imperial design standardized under Vespasian, with engravings of victory motifs that controlled a legionary's pride even in death. But then, analysis revealed personal touches, a scratched inscription, Valery of Smevs claiming ownership, a whisper from a man whose life ended abruptly, his belt controlling identity beyond the grave. Drifting northward to the Limes frontiers, where the empire's edges crumbled, sites like Vindonissa in Switzerland, abandoned around 101 after Christ, have yielded troves of belt components, discarded in latrine pits or lost in the rush of relocation. Excavations in the 20th century uncovered over 100 fragments, leather strips rotted but impressions preserved in clay, bronze fittings dented from use, their hooks bent from repeated draws of the gladius. One particularly evocative piece, found in 1910, is a centurion's plate with silver inlay, engraved with a scene of Trajan's Dacian triumph, its edges worn smooth from years of polishing. Feel the texture in your mind, the cool metal, pitted by centuries underground, yet holding the echo of marches along the Rhine. These finds control our understanding of evolution, comparing Vindonissa's early 2nd century belts to later ones. From nearby Augst shows aprons lengthening, then shortening, adapting to changing threats like Alemanni raids that tested the lime's defenses. Across the Channel in Britannia, Hadrian's Wall has been a goldmine of relics since its systematic digs began in the 1920s under British archaeologists like R.G. Collingwood. At forts like Housesteads, belts emerged from the turf, their leather miraculously surviving in waterlogged conditions and aerobic bogs preserving organic matter like a time capsule. A notable discovery in 1973, a complete cingulum from the 3rd century. Its band still supple pouches containing rusted coins and a bone dye artifacts that paint off-duty scenes of gambling under torchlight. The aprons, studs, arranged in patterns mimicking Celtic knots, hint at cultural blending with local recruits, controlling identity in a hybrid frontier. But then, tragedy's marks appear. A belt from Chester's fort, slashed across the middle, perhaps stripped in punishment or battle. Its plates scattered as if in flight during the wall's abandonment around 410 after Christ. These pieces, housed in museums like the British Museum, allow reconstructions, experts stitching replicas to test weight and wear, revealing how the cingulum distributed loads during eternal marches. Eastern frontiers whisper their own secrets. From the sands of Durarapos in Syria, excavated in the 1930s by Yale and French teams, buried under Sassanid siege debris from 256 after Christ. A soldier's cingulum was found amid the rubble of a collapsed tower plates with Parthian-inspired engravings, gold accents from Eastern trade, the leather charred but intact. This relic controls narratives of late Empire adaptation. Its longer hooks for Spathe swords reflect shifts to cavalry tactics against Persian a response to the 3rd century crises that reshaped Roman warfare. Personal drama unfolds. 2. A pouch held a faded papyrus scrap, a letter fragment in Greek. To my beloved returned safe, echoing the family influences that lingered even in distant postings. Comparable finds from Egypt's Fayum region, like those from Quranis dug in the 1920s, include belts with Christian Shiro symbols from the 4th century, blending pagan eagle motifs with new faith, controlling spiritual transitions as Constantine's edicts spread. Battlefield archaeology adds visceral layers. Sites like Teutoburg Forest in Germany, where Varus's legions perished in 9F to Christ, yielding scattered fittings since rediscoveries in the 1980s. Metal detectors have unearthed hooks and studs amid arrowheads and bones, their dents from desperate parries telling of the cingulum's role in epic clashes. One plate, inscribed Leg 19, links to a lost legion, its absence from later records a testament to annihilation, the belt controlling historical memory through survival. In the 5th century's twilight, graves from the Rhine-Danube confluence reveal buried singly folded neatly beside skeletons. Plates with barbarian influences like animal-style art, marking the Romano-Germanic fusion as the West fell. Excavations at sites like Krefeld Gelb in the 1960s uncovered such tombs. Belts interred with owners as grave goods, controlling afterlife. Journeys in a Christian-pagan blend on technological advances enhance these whispers. CT scans in modern labs reveal hidden engravings under corrosion, like a 3rd century plate from Carnuntum scanned in 2015, uncovering a personal vow to Mithras invisible to the eye. Isotope analysis traces materials: tin from Cornwall, leather from Italian herds, mapping trade routes that sustain the cingulum's production. Museums worldwide display these relics. The Louvre's collection from Gaul with belts showing late evolutions under the Tetrarchy, or Istanbul's artifacts from Byzantine transitions, where the cingulum morphed into medieval baldricks. These finds aren't mere objects, they're portals, controlling our connection to the past. Marcus's imagined belt, buried in some forgotten frontier soil, might await discovery, its scars narrating a life bound by leather and bronze. In the soft light of excavation tents, archaeologists continue the dialogue, each brushstroke unveiling how the cingulum endured, a relic bridging empires to eternity. If this unearthed journey through time's soil is settling you into a dreamy, archaeological haze, subscribe if you like the video. It's a dig that uncovers more buried wonders, but relics invite reflection on today, where modern symbols echo ancient controls. As artifacts rest in glass cases, let's draw parallels to contemporary emblems, where belts of duty persist in new forms. In our contemporary world, echoes of the cingulum militare resonate through modern symbols of authority, identity, and routine uniform accessories that control lives with the same quiet insistence, binding individuals to roles in societies far removed from ancient Rome yet strikingly parallel in their demands. As we gaze upon those glass-encased relics in museums today, it's impossible not to draw lines to the badges, holsters, and emblems worn by police officers, soldiers, or even corporate workers, each a descendant of that Roman belt, shaping behavior, status, and survival in the hustle of the 21st century. Let's explore these comparisons softly, like flipping through a photo album of history's continuities, where the past's leather and bronze find kin in nylon webs and digital tags, a bridge across millennia that invites us to see how such items still orchestrate our daily dances of duty and self. Consider the modern military belt, a direct heir to the cingulum in form and function. Today's soldiers, whether in the US Army or NATO forces, buckle on tactical belts laden with pouches for ammunition, radios and multi-tools, much like Mark is securing his gladius and rations before a Rhine patrol. These mall-compatible rigs, lightweight load-carrying equipment, distribute weight across the hips, preventing fatigue during endless hikes through Afghan mountains or Ukrainian plains, controlling endurance in conflicts that echo Rome's frontier wars. Picture a young recruit in basic training today, feeling the heft of a duty belt for the first time. Its Velcro and buckles clicking into place with that same mix of pride and apprehension Marcus knew. But then, evolution shows, while the apron dangled for intimidation, modern equivalents feature quick-release holsters for sidearms designed for split-second draws in urban combat, a nod to the Pugio's role in close-quarters Roman brawls. In exercises mimicking ancient drills, these belts enforce posture and readiness, with sergeants barking corrections akin to centurions, controlling the transformation from civilian to warrior. Law enforcement carries the legacy forward, where the police duty belt, often called a Sam Browne after its 19th century British inventor, mirrors the cingulum's blend of utility and authority. Officers patrol city streets with belts holding handcuffs, tasers, batons, and firearms, the weight a constant reminder of their role as guardians, much like Roman legionaries on urban watch in Ostia or Antioch. Imagine an officer like a modern Lucius adjusting his belt before a shift, the leather creaking under the load of a body camera pouch that records every interaction, controlling accountability in an era of scrutiny. The belt's presence commands respect, its gleam under streetlights deterring minor crimes, but it also burdens chafing during long foot pursuits or weighing down in stakeouts. Paralleling the Roman soldier's eternal marches, personal stories abound, a veteran cop etching a fallen partner's badge number into a buckle plate, a customization echoing Lucius's vine motifs for Flavia, turning gear into a talisman of memory and motivation. Even in civilian realms, symbols akin to the cingulum, control lives through subtle hierarchies. Think of the utility belt of a construction worker or electrician, festooned with tools, hammers, pliers, tape measures hanging from loops that keep hands free for labor. Much like the Roman engineers Delabra secured during road building, these belts distribute weight to prevent injury, controlling safety in high-risk jobs that build modern empires of skyscrapers and highways. Or consider the corporate belt in metaphorical terms, the ID badge, lanyard, or smartwatch that tracks productivity, binding employees to schedules and status, with promotions adding plates like access cards or company pins. In tech firms, engineers wear tool belts for prototypes, their pouches holding circuit boards and wires, controlling innovation. In Silicon Valleys that rival Rome's forums for ambition. But then, status symbols evolve. A CEO's luxury watch strap, adorned with diamonds, parallels a centurion's silver-inlaid cingulum, signaling rank in boardrooms where deals conquer markets like legions took provinces. Sports and adventure gear offer playful parallels, where climbing harnesses or weightlifting belts control performance and protection. A rock climber's harness, with its loops for carabiners and quick draws, echoes the cingulum's suspension system, distributing forces during ascents that test human limits. Much like a legionary scaling siege walls, the belt tightens for security, controlling fear in vertical worlds, its buckles clicking like apron studs in the wind. In gyms, powerlifters cinch wide leather belts to support spines during heavy lifts, a functional nod to the cingulum's back. During Roman labors, with custom engravings, motivational quotes, or gym logos personalizing the tool like ancient soldiers' godly invocations, these modern versions, often made from synthetic materials resistant to sweat and strain, evolved from leather origins, controlling athletic pursuits in a society that idolizes physical prowess as Rome did its warriors. Cultural and fashion realms soften the martial edge, yet retain control. Designer belts from brands like Gucci or Hermes serve as status symbols, their buckles engraved with logos that denote wealth and taste, akin to a veteran Roman's ornate cingulum displayed in retirement. In pop culture, superhero utility belts, Batman's arsenal of gadgets fantasize the cingulum's utility, controlling narratives of heroism in comics and films that draw from historical epics. Even in everyday fashion, a simple leather belt holds trousers but signals style, with punk rockers adding studs reminiscent of Roman aprons, controlling rebellion through adornment. Subtler still are digital belts, fitness trackers strapped to wrists, monitoring steps and heart rates, controlling health routines with data echoes of the cingulum's daily rhythm. Punishments and losses parallel to a modern soldier stripped of their belt in disciplinary action feels the same humiliation as a Roman losing his cingulum, demoted and disarmed. In policing, a suspended officer turning in their duty belt symbolizes lost authority, controlling behavior through absence. Archaeological insights inform these comparisons. Museums like the Smithsonian display Roman belts alongside World War II gear, highlighting continuities in design that control our perception of history as a continuum. These modern echoes aren't coincidences. They stem from human needs for symbols that organize, protect, and elevate. The cingulum's DNA persists, controlling lives in uniforms or accessories that bind us to roles, much as it did for Marcus buckling up each dawn. In reflecting on these, we see the belt's timeless grip, a quiet controller across eras. If this bridging of ancient and modern is weaving a relaxing tapestry in your thoughts, subscribe if you like the video. It's a modern link that keeps these comparisons coming. Yet beyond comparisons lie deeper lessons, eternal reflections on what the cingulum teaches us today. As symbols align across time, let's ponder those enduring insights, where the belt's legacy offers wisdom for our own bound lives. As we trace the cingulum's path from ancient forges to modern echoes, it becomes clear that this simple strip of leather and metal holds timeless lessons, not just about history, but about the human condition, how symbols shape us, bind us, and sometimes set us free in the quiet rhythms of existence. For Marcus, buckling his cingulum each dawn amid the uncertainties of frontier life, or for Lucius, passing its weight to his son as a final act of legacy, the belt taught endurance, identity, and the delicate balance between control and choice. Let's reflect on these eternal insights, drifting through the philosophies it evokes, like a soft current carrying us from Rome's dusty roads to our own daily paths, where the lessons whisper of resilience, symbolism, and the threads that connect, past burdens to present strengths. At its heart, the cingulum reminds us of the power of symbols to define and discipline. In Roman times, it wasn't merely functional, it embodied the stoic virtues praised by philosophers like Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations, duty as a girdle that holds the self together amid chaos. Imagine Marcus the emperor, not our young soldier but the philosopher king, perhaps contemplating a similar belt during his Danube campaigns in the late 2nd century, seeing in its sturdy band a metaphor for self-mastery. Tighten it for focus, maintain it for longevity. Today, this lesson endures. Our own belts, be they wedding rings symbolizing commitment or fitness, trackers monitoring steps, control habits with gentle insistence, teaching that true strength lies in the routines we choose to embrace. But then, over-tightening brings strain. Just as a chafing cingulum could hobble a legionary on march, our modern obsessions with productivity apps or social media metrics can bind too tightly, reminding us to loosen for breath, to balance control with compassion toward ourselves. Another profound insight lies in the belt's role as a marker of status and transition, a ladder climbed through sweat and scars. From recruit to veteran, the cingulum's evolving adornments mirrored life's milestones, much like the rites of passage in ancient mystery cults where initiates girded themselves for enlightenment. Lucius's journey from plain leather to engraved gold illustrates how achievements accumulate, each plate a chapter in personal growth. Reflect on this in our era. Promotions add plates to our resumes, certifications to our LinkedIn profiles, controlling perceptions of worth in a competitive world. Yet the cingulum warns of hubris. A stripped belt and punishment humbled the mighty, echoing the Greek concept of hybris that felled heroes. In contemporary terms, scandals strip modern figures of their symbols, CEOs losing corner offices, athletes, their endorsements teaching humility. Status is loaned, not owned, and true honor resides not in the gleam, but in the integrity beneath. The belt also whispers of adaptability, evolving through empire's rises and falls, a lesson in resilience amid change. From republican simplicity to late imperial hybrids, the cingulum bent without breaking, incorporating Etruscan craftsmanship, Celtic flair, even barbarian influences as Rome waned. This mirrors Darwinian survival, where flexibility trumps rigidity. Think of how species adapt traits for new environments, much as the belt's hooks shifted for longer swords in the 4th century. For us, this reflection urges embrace of change. Careers pivot in economic shifts, relationships evolve through trials, controlling our paths not through resistance, but reinvention. Marcus, mending his cingulum after a skirmish, embodied this scars integrated, not erased, turning weakness into woven strength. In a world of AI disruptions and climate uncertainties, the belt counsels adapt your gear, whether skills or mindsets, to endure the march ahead. Deeper still, the cingulum illuminates the interplay of individual and collective, how personal touches on a uniform item fostered brotherhood, while allowing self. In the legions, shared designs unified ranks, yet etchings of home gods or lovers' vines preserved the soul, controlling isolation in vast campaigns. This duality echoes modern psychology's balance of conformity and autonomy, Maslow's hierarchy where belonging enables self-actualization. Reflect on teams today. Corporate uniforms or sports jerseys bind groups, but custom patches or nicknames add flavor, preventing alienation. Lucius's vine-studded belt, a nod to Flavia amid Judean sieges, shows how such anchors sustain lives. Photos in wallets or tattoos of meaningful symbols serve similarly, controlling emotional anchors against life's sieges like pandemics or losses. Punishment's lessons sting eternal too. The cingulum's loss as ultimate disgrace teaches accountability's weight. Stripped of it, a soldier lost honor, mirroring exile in ancient myths like Ovid's banishment, where symbols of belonging were revoked. This controls behavior through shame's shadow, a concept alive in cancel culture or professional blacklisting, where digital belts, verified badges, or credentials are revoked, humbling the errant. Yet redemption arcs inspire. Reclaiming a belt through valor parallels modern comebacks, from athletes overcoming scandals to individuals rebuilding after failures, reminding that falls forge deeper strength, with forgiveness as the that heals. Family reflections tie intimately. The cingulum, influencing homes as a bridge between worlds, passed to sons or mended by wives. It controlled legacies, echoing Confucian filial piety where ancestors' tools guide descendants. In our time, heirlooms like grandfather's watch or mother's recipe book serve thus, binding generations. Flavius' charms in Lucius's pouch highlight care's power. Today, apps tracking loved ones, locations, or shared calendars control family bonds. Similarly, blending protection with presence. But the belt warns of burdens. Its weight on a soldier's hips parallels parental sacrifices, teaching that love often means carrying others' loads gracefully. Spiritually, the cingulum evokes girding for life's battles, a motif in texts from the Bible's belt of truth to Eastern sashes in martial arts, controlling readiness for moral or physical trials. Marcus Aurelius might have seen it thus, a stoic tool against fate's whims. For us, mindfulness practices gird the mind, with routines like meditation belts against anxiety's chaos. These reflections aren't abstract. They're lived, the cingulum a mirror for introspection. It teaches that controls self-imposed or but don't define us. We choose how tightly to buckle. In embracing its lessons, we honor those like Marcus and Lucius, whose belts bound empires, but whose spirits soared free. If this contemplative weave of eternal wisdom is stirring gentle insights within you, subscribe if you like the video. A timeless thread that draws more reflections your way. But reflections lead to closure, connecting threads of past and present in a serene farewell. As lessons settle like dusk over ancient hills, let's draw this tale to its peaceful end, where the cingulum's echo lingers in the night. As our journey through the shadowed corridors of history draws to a gentle close, let's pause one last time by that imaginary campfire, its embers glowing softly like the fading stars of the Roman firmament, weaving the threads of ancient leather and bronze into the fabric of our own present lives. We've wandered far from the humble origins of a recruit's first buckle to the profound lessons etched in every plate, seeing how this unassuming belt controlled not just soldiers like Marcus and Lucius, but the very pulse of an empire that shaped the world. Now, in this serene farewell, we connect those distant echoes to the here and now, reflecting on how the past's quiet grip still holds us, inviting a peaceful release into the embrace of sleep, where history whispers its final lullaby. Imagine, if you will, standing on a hill overlooking modern Rome, the Colosseum bathed in twilight, its stones silent witnesses to the legions that once marched beneath similar skies. The cingulum, though buried or displayed in museums, lives on in the collective memory, a bridge linking eras through shared human experiences of duty, loss, and triumph. For Marcus, whose life we followed from wide-eyed youth to battle-hardened veteran, the belt was a constant companion, controlling his steps from Etrurian fields to Rhine mists, much as our own routines, morning commutes, or evening rituals, and us in the chaos of contemporary existence. His story reminds us that control isn't always chains. Sometimes it's the steady hand guiding us through uncertainty, like a GPS in a storm, ensuring we arrive, if not unscathed. Then wiser, Lucius's tale, with its personal engravings and family ties, connects even more intimately to the present, where we adorn our lives with symbols that bind us to loved ones, wedding bands etched with dates, necklaces holding ashes, or digital profiles sharing memories across oceans. In the late empire's turmoil, as his belt adapted to invasions and faiths, it mirrored our world's rapid shifts, pandemics reshaping work, technologies altering connections, yet human resilience persisting. Flavia's gentle influence, mending straps by hearthlight, evokes modern partners supporting each other through deployments or deadlines, controlling homes' harmony amid external storms. Their children, playing with the apron's weight, passed on legacies that echo in how we teach our own stories at bedtime, skills handed down, ensuring the past informs the future without overwhelming it. Archaeological relics, those tangible whispers from the soil, serve as portals, much like old family photos or archived emails that connect us to ancestors. A dented plate from Teutoburg, unearthed centuries later, speaks of loss and recovery, paralleling how we sift through digital footprints after a loved one's passing, finding solace in preserved words. These finds control our narrative of history, reminding that what we leave behind, be it a bronze fitting or a social media post, shapes how posterity sees us. In museums today, visitors gaze at cinguli under glass, feeling a kinship with the hands that polished them, a serene reminder that we're all part of an unbroken chain. each link forged in the fires of time. Modern comparisons deepen this connection, showing the cingulum's spirit in everyday emblems that organize our worlds. A firefighter's harness, laden with tools for rescue, controls chaos and flames, as the belt did in battle. A nurse's lanyard, holding ID and keys, binds her to shifts that heal, echoing the legionary's vigilant watch. Even in leisure, a hiker's waist pack secures essentials on trails that wind like Roman roads, controlling adventure with preparation. These parallels teach that while forms evolve from leather to nylon, bronze to plastic, the essence remains. Symbols that empower, yet remind us of limits, fostering humility in a tech-driven age where algorithms buckle our choices, suggesting paths but leaving the walk to us. Eternal lessons culminate here, in this peaceful convergence of then and now, that cingulum's adaptability urges us to flex with life's bends, its status markers to value inner worth over outer shine, its punishments to learn from falls without despair. In connecting past and present, we see history not as distant dust, but as a living stream flowing through us. Marcus's march in our steps, Lucius's love in our hearts. As the empire faded, so do all things, but echoes endure, controlling legacies in subtle ways. A museum visit inspiring a child, a story like this lulling you to rest. Feel the warmth of that campfire dimming now, the wind carrying away the last whispers of ancient Rome. The cingulum, once heavy with duty, rests light in memory, a gentle reminder that we've journeyed together through time's serene river. Thank you for sharing this tale. May it wrap you in peaceful dreams, where past and present mingle like stars in the night sky. If you liked the video, subscribe. It's the final buckle that keeps these stories connected, ready for new adventures in history's embrace.